Guys ready? Good evening, everyone. I'm calling the City Council meeting to order. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our statement of values? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interest of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Assistant City Clerk, roll call.
Councilmember Mahan. Councilmember Hardy.
Present.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Here.
Councilmember Davis. Councilmember Watanabe. Councilmember Shahal.
Here.
And Mayor Gilmore.
Here.
Thank you. May I read the AB 23 announcement?
Yes, please.
Members of the Santa Clara Stadium Authority, Sports and Open Space Authority, and Housing Authority are entitled to receive $30 for each attended meeting. A statement of behavioral standards. The City of Santa Clara has adopted a code of ethics and values and behavioral standards for public meetings to promote and maintain the highest levels of conduct. This includes mutual respect, robust discussion, and allowing city business to be done in an efficient and consistent manner. Please note that as a presiding officer, the mayor's direction in matters of process and decorum should be followed, and that use of the gavel indicates all conversations must conclude and everyone in attendance should come to order and attention. Welcome and thank you for your participation. In addition, registered lobbyists appearing in a lobbying capacity are required to identify themselves as such and disclose the clients and/or organizations that he or she represents at any meeting held with city officials or at public meetings pursuant to City Code Section 2.155.110. Our speaker cards have been revised and actually reflect what I've just read. So this will be the last time I read this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have our first order of business this evening is a presentation by the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority on the BART Phase 2 project and the Transit-Oriented Development Corridor Strategies and Access Planning Study. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Mike Liu, Assistant Director of Public Works. Happy to be here. It's my pleasure to introduce presenters from the VTA for our study session today on BART Phase 2. We have our presentation up here. Sitting to my right are Jill Gibson. She's the VTA BART Phase 2 Planning and Program Manager. And then also we have Ron Golem, who's the VTA's Director of Real Estate and Joint Development. They have a presentation they'd like to run through with the council and on the project. And also want to talk, and then they're going to talk about the BART Phase 2 project itself, the construction project, its status, and milestones moving forward. Also transit-oriented community strategy study that they've been working with staff from San Jose as well as our city as well. And they'll also be available for questions and answers. With that, I'll turn it over to Jill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. So my name is Jill Gibson, as Mike mentioned, and I'm the VTA BART Phase 2 Outreach and Planning Manager. And again, tonight, Ron Golem is here with me. He's VTA's Director of Real Estate and Transit-Oriented Development. So tonight, we're going to provide an update on the BART Phase 2 project, as well as an introduction to the Transit-Oriented Community Strategy Study. While the BART Silicon Valley program is about extending BART service to Santa Clara County, it's about much more than a transit infrastructure project. This project provides us the opportunity to shape the station areas through creating walkable, lively, mixed-use communities all centered around the future BART station areas, which would ensure a return on the transit investment through increased ridership and provide substantial community benefits that we'll talk about tonight. So we're going to begin with the Phase 2 update, and then I'll hand it over to Ron to cover the Transit-Oriented Community Strategy Study.
Okay.
So currently, BART operates as far south as Warm Springs in Fremont, as you can see in the small map to the right. VTA's BART Silicon Valley program aims to fill the missing gap to ring the bay with rail transit. The project is being delivered in 2 phases. So phase 1 is a 10-mile extension with 2 stations, Milpitas and Berryessa, North San Jose. This first phase is in the system testings phase, which must be successfully completed before phase 1 can open to passenger service. Phase 1 is expected to open in late 2019. Phase 2, so the subject of tonight's presentation, is a 6-mile extension, of which 5 miles of that will be an underground tunnel. The Phase 2 extension has 4 stations and includes a maintenance facility in Santa Clara. The average weekday ridership anticipated for the Phase 2 extension by 2035 is 52,000 riders. VTA and BART have been working closely together to get where we are today. As you may know, the Santa Clara County is not a part of the BART district, which is why VTA and BART have a unique relationship critical to delivering this project. And each agency's roles are outlined in a comprehensive agreement. So VTA is required to cover all of the costs for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the extension. It also will oversee the contracting and procurement for the project, including the construction. So once constructed, VTA will retain the ownership of all of the infrastructure. BART is providing technical assistance during the planning, design, and construction of the project. And once constructed, BART will operate and maintain the system. And BART will also determine the service levels and operating hours through service planning. As you know, VTA has a long-standing partnership with the city of Santa Clara, and we have a history of working quite closely together. We wanted to start by highlighting our partnership.
Who is that woman in that picture?
We wanted to start by highlighting our partnership on the award-winning pedestrian undercrossing project under the Caltrain tracks, which will be a key access feature for the future Santa Clara BART station. For the BART project to be successful, VTA desires to continue and expand upon our previous collaborations with the city to the mutual benefit of both organizations as well as the community. Because Santa Clara County is not a part of the BART district, there have been several measures passed by the voters to fund the construction and operation of the system. Santa Clara County residents have voted overwhelmingly in support of various ballot measures in 2000, 2008, and 2016 in support of the project. VTA has identified a funding strategy for $5.581 billion. The project has significant local support, with 75% of that funding coming from local and state sources which have been secured. We will be requesting the remaining federal funding from the Federal Transit Administration. So as we advance the preliminary engineering over the next year, we'll refine the project cost and schedule in preparation of our FTA grant application submittal. And we anticipate receiving word about this last $1.395 billion later next year, so later in 2020. This slide shows the Phase 2 alignment. There are 4 proposed stations, including the Alum Rock 28th Street Station, downtown San Jose, the Diridon Station, and the Santa Clara Station, adjacent to the current Caltrain station. The first of these 3 stations will be in an underground single-bore configuration, which is the first of its kind for transit in the United States. While the Santa Clara station will be at the street level, and this extension also includes the construction of a maintenance facility near the Santa Clara station. The Newhall maintenance facility will be constructed to accommodate the new service provided by the BART extension. This facility will be located on the former Union Pacific Newhall yard that VTA purchased back in 2004. The Newhall facility is situated between the existing Caltrain corridor and the Coleman Highline and Gateway Crossings projects. And the BART logo on the screen is the location of the station facilities from our environmental document. This roughly 40-acre facility will include storage for BART vehicles, and some of the key elements of the Newhall maintenance facility include a train car washer, an inspection pit, maintenance shops, and various train control, power, and communications facilities. Most of the maintenance activities will occur inside of buildings on the site. The Santa Clara station will be the end of the line station for the BART extension. And the slide on the screen is a conceptual site plan from the environmental document that is based on conceptual engineering. As we advance our engineering, we expect the sizing, the orientation, and the configuration of the station and the facilities to likely change as we refine and update the design. To orient you, the Caltrain station is on the west, and you can see the Costco just northeast of the station. The station platform is shown in yellow, adjacent to the existing Caltrain station. So again, unlike the previous 3 stations, the Santa Clara BART station will be constructed at the surface level and will be accessible to the west via the pedestrian undercrossing that I mentioned earlier. In addition to the platform and the systems facilities, the station will include up to 500 BART parking spaces, and the environmental document cleared transit-oriented development intended to be integrated within the station facilities. A benefit of this project is that it will connect to a number of regional transportation services, including VTA's bus services, Caltrain, ACE, Capital Corridor, as well as our neighbors at the airport. And of course, the future high-speed rail connection would just be a short ride to the Diridon station. We're anticipating roughly half of the BART riders to access the system through these transit modes. The station will, of course, accommodate bus, PED facilities, and bike facilities, encouraging folks to choose healthier modes and greener modes of transportation to get to the station. I'd like to review our 3-year look ahead and review some of our recent and upcoming milestones. So in April of 2018, the VTA Board of Directors approved the project and certified our environmental document. We then received a record of decision from the Federal Transit Administration in June of 2018. This allowed us to enter the engineering and pre-construction phase. So we're currently in the engineering phase, which our principal objective over the next year is to advance the design from the conceptual level to the preliminary engineering level. So that's roughly a 30% level of design. This engineering work will inform our project costs as well as our schedule. So we anticipate in roughly a year's time from now to submit to the federal government a grant application for the remaining dollars, the federal dollars that I mentioned previously. And again, this application will be based on the preliminary engineering level and will include updates to the project cost, the schedule, and the funding strategy. And we hope to receive the FTA funding later in 2020. VTA is conducting general outreach and more targeted stakeholder engagement. Our general outreach is meant to inform the broader community about the project. So we've got websites, fact sheets, and social media are ways in which we engage the public. And our stakeholder engagement is targeting individuals and groups that are most interested and potentially affected by the project. So each station area has community working groups, which we call CWGs, which meet every other month to provide updates, and we solicit input on specific topics. So our Santa Clara CWG includes neighborhood associations, business representatives, schools such as the Bellarmine College Prep and Santa Clara University. And recently we took the Santa Clara CWG as well as city staff on a tour of a similar BART maintenance facility in Concord to allow them to get insight into the function of the facility as well as how the facility fits into the surrounding neighborhood. And I'm happy to report they were pleasantly surprised to see that the facility was fairly quiet from the outside. And I believe they greatly appreciated the opportunity to speak with BART maintenance staff and ask questions. And the image on the screen with the folks in the neon vests is from that tour. One of the ways in which we are conducting our general outreach and project education is through 3 upcoming community meetings. We are hosting these 3 community meetings in the next few weeks, including 2 in the next 2 days. So we invite all interested to attend and participate in these open houses and learn about the project's progress and interact directly with VTA project staff on a variety of elements. The last of these community meetings will be held Saturday, May 11th from 10 to noon and will take place at Bookser Middle School in the city of Santa Clara. So next steps, as we mentioned, I mentioned that the project is a significant endeavor that will span many years to come. And so I want to thank city staff for how collaborative they've been and how engaged they've been thus far. And we look forward to continuing to work closely with the city as we advance through various phases of planning, design, and construction. We'll soon kick off our station access planning effort that will help inform the station design. This will feed into the preliminary engineering effort that I talked about earlier, which is necessary to receive the federal funding. And we also look forward to coordinating closely with staff as we begin developing a cooperative agreement between the City of Santa Clara and VTA. So I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to update you on the BART Silicon Valley program. And Ron is here to speak about the Transit-Oriented Community Strategy Study, which is critical to the success of the BART extension.
Thank you, and we'll save all our questions to the end. I know I have a couple. Yes, welcome.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'd like to talk now about what we think of as the other half of the project. As important and as significant as this major infrastructure project is to extend BART transit service to Santa Clara and San Jose, we think the equally important part of this project is about how we facilitate and spur transit-oriented development all around the future stations in order to maximize the benefits. To say it simply, we look at the BART extension as a once-in-a-century opportunity for us to organize the county's growth, a large portion of that growth, around the BART stations by creating high-quality transit and transit-oriented development. Now, to realize that opportunity, we believe, and this is what the experience of other places have been, is that we need a coordinated and comprehensive strategy that outlines how we go about doing that, and that strategy in turn is actually going to be important to obtain funding from the federal government. That's the remaining financing piece. This is something the federal government, through its program, is looking for us to provide to justify the federal investment. So by having a proactive approach to organizing growth around the stations, we can actually increase ridership, we can generate a greater return on the investment, we think we can accommodate more development potential than has been identified to date, and we can secure the final piece of federal funding for the project. To help us understand this, we've been going through a process to formulate a strategy for what a transit-oriented development strategy would be and the creation of transit-oriented communities. We've been fortunate to receive a grant from the Federal Transit Administration to fund this effort. We're working with an extended consultant team that has experts on transit-oriented development throughout the country, both in terms of planning, design, economics, transportation, all the issues. And what we've been trying to do with the study is really start with all the great work the city has done to date in terms of its specific plans and its other efforts, and really build on that to both identify what's needed and also think in a very detailed way about implementation and financing. So this is an effort that we've been going on since last year, working with city staff both in Santa Clara and San Jose to really identify what are the kinds of tools and incentives that can spur TOD, to understand how land use and zoning policies can ensure successful transit-oriented development, and what are some of the potential barriers and challenges that have to be addressed. Ultimately, what we think is that this study will help us understand not just the opportunity implementation, but what are ways that in terms of some of the public improvements that will be needed, what are ways to pay for those, to finance necessary infrastructure and access improvements? How can we address critical needs in our county for items such as affordable housing? And how can we do this in a way that really enhances existing businesses and residents and creates opportunities for them? Ultimately, what we hope to do is create a framework for successful TOD. And what I mean by a framework is really understanding that to accomplish this goal, this is a long-term effort. Ultimately, building out the station areas is not a 5-year, 10-year effort. It's potentially a 15, 20-year plus effort. So it spans decades, but at the same time, it's important to start now so we can put the pieces in place for success. What we know from studying the experience of other places that have done this successfully is that to be successful, you have to have sustained institutional leadership, we need to have staff capacity, and we need to have financing for the necessary improvements. Just to state the obvious, in particular for the Santa Clara station, because we have two cities adjacent to each other and the station area covers the two different cities, a joint approach to how we implement transit-oriented development is going to be important that really breaks down some of the existing silos. The other key element of a framework, and again, building on experience with other places, is that having robust regulatory and financial incentives have really been the magic to how you create successful transit-oriented communities. It requires specialized zoning that supports TOD and early capital investments to really enhance walkability, support all access modes, add open space, and provide the incentives. So our approach to this study has really been to try to bring together two main categories of work. One is looking at land use and really how we're trying to look at not just individual transit-oriented development projects, but the creation of a transit-oriented community throughout the entire station area. And so that involves both understanding what is the opportunity and helping to develop and how you can enhance a vision for the growth around the stations. How you go about creating the investments that are needed, and how you go about implementing that. That's been matched up to access planning that understands what is the multimodal set of improvements that are needed to really facilitate pedestrians, bikes, all modes of access to the stations to enhance accessibility and ridership and support growth. And so this is a study we started last year. We're hoping to complete it this fall. And we've been focusing on the Santa Clara station. We've been focusing on downtown and 28th Street. I think, as you know, Dearborn has been the subject of a separate effort that's been between VTA and the city and the various other parties that are involved in the Dearborn station effort. So what do we hope to accomplish with this study? There's really three main categories of things we're trying to do, and this is the graphics trying to illustrate. One is we're very focused on placemaking. How do we create a destination, a place that people want to be? We're focused on mobility. How do we maximize use of transit in all access modes? How do we create economic value to support all this and support the financing improvements? And ultimately, if you bring these things together, it's really about the user experience. For the people that live here, for the people that work here, for the people that visit here, how do we make the station area a place that they want to be and keep coming back to and spending time in? So to get there, what we're envisioning is really a series of what we call transit-oriented community playbooks. So we envision this study will eventually provide a playbook for how the Santa Clara station area can realize its full potential. It will address land use and zoning recommendations to help support a balanced 24-hour place, development guidelines to create pedestrian-friendly environments, priorities for infrastructure and access improvements to serve the transit-oriented community, as well as policies to support good TOD, and how we pay for the necessary public improvements to realize this vision, and how we implement it and the benefits that would result from it. So we are currently in the third phase of the study. We spent last year looking at background conditions, understanding what's kind of the existing conditions on the ground, what are some of the opportunities, but what are some of the constraints. Right now, we're in the process of looking at what are the range of strategies that really come together and would do this. And so we're looking about how to create a deeper market for transit-oriented development, how to address concerns around displacement, trying to identify what are some of the public and private improvements that are needed, and addressing funding and implementation. And I think it's important for me to highlight that, our role, we're not the city, we're not the land use entity, so we see this as an effort to outline a strategy that says, here's how it can be done, and here's how to go about doing that. But what we hope the ultimate work does is it serves as a resource for the city and other interested parties to kind of go through the kinds of actions the city will need to do to successfully implement this. And VTA very much looks forward to working with the city in that stage. Ultimately, we are going to be having a final report, and we hope to come back to you later this fall with the full report to outline the findings and recommendations, and then really have a detailed discussion about kind of how we get there and what are the steps that are involved. Just to give you a bit more background, we've been talking about what are the stationary boundaries. And so the graphic is showing you is for each of the three stations we're studying, what is the 10-minute walk shed and what is the 10-minute bike shed from the station. And we've tried to align with existing planning areas. And I'll talk about this more in a minute, but what you can see in the Santa Clara station is both it outlines the opportunities on either side of the tracks, but it also, I think, outlines the important opportunity to connect with the university, as well as the downtown area, as well as the nearby areas along El Camino Real. And finally, I want to show this graphic because I think in general, a lot of folks may look at the station and the tracks that go through the middle of it are certainly a barrier and an impediment. But we think this graphic nicely shows a lot of the opportunities to create a transit-oriented community in terms of access to key points in Santa Clara, in terms of the TOD that's already starting to happen on the east side of the tracks, in terms of some of the opportunities to even build TOD we're thinking about, for example, on the other side of Coleman in the industrial area that's next to the airport for those areas to be revitalized. And so we think that when you look at this area and you look at the pieces, and again, long-term, the properties that may redevelop over the next 10 to 15 plus years, we think that this station area is one of the most underappreciated station areas in terms of the TOD opportunity. And so I'm here to say that from our perspective, we are excited about the potential for the Santa Clara station area. We think there's a great opportunity to create a transit-oriented community, and we very much look forward to working with city staff and others to help bring that about. So with that, I'd like to bring Jill back to talk about some of the process and the public engagement we've had to get to this point.
Thank you.
So as Ron mentioned, VTA is conducting this study through a FTA grant. And because VTA does not have land use authority, we're working quite closely with the City of Santa Clara and the City of San Jose to develop the strategies throughout the life of this study. So coordination with city staff is essential for the success of the study. So we've been utilizing our technical advisory group, which is our formal group that is really guiding the direction of the study, which is composed of both cities as well as the BART organization. We've been conducting extensive stakeholder engagement with both community organizations and advocacy groups through various briefings, as well as neighborhood association groups. We've been able to leverage our CWGs that I talked about earlier to solicit input and gather feedback from workshop participants. So over the past year, we've held dozens of stakeholder briefings, and we've held 5 workshops at each CWG. Notably, the 5th one was last week. So I wanted to take a few minutes to share some of the feedback we've received thus far at our Santa Clara station area workshops. In terms of height and density, there seemed to be significant support for increased density in the station area, so long as new development would be stepped down as it gets closer to the existing single-family neighborhoods. The El Camino Real corridor was identified as an opportunity for higher density development. And overall, there were some concerns about the feasibility of high-rise residential development, particularly near the airport. The community expressed a desire for more ground floor retail and entertainment in the area. And throughout our workshops, we identified a need for some hotels to serve the airport, the university, and new businesses. The public also raised the need for new workforce housing and offices in the area, and the need to evaluate how parking will be handled in the future, including developing flexible parking solutions. One of the greatest challenges facing the area, as Ron mentioned, is the lack of connectivity from the historic downtown to the university and across the railroad tracks to the future BART station. The community expressed the need for improved connections to the Guadalupe Trail and for creative solutions to overcome the existing barriers for cyclists and for pedestrians, such as the railroad tracks, El Camino Real, and Coleman Avenue. We've spent a lot of time talking to the community and stakeholders about the study's goals and objectives and the outcomes that they would like to see. And as we move forward, we'll continue to collaborate with the city staff in the development of the strategies and the recommendations. There are more public engagement activities underway, and we're continuing to present at our CWGs, which are open to the public, and briefing stakeholders. We're also using online media to get people engaged and participate in online dialogue about transit-oriented communities, and in particular, the strategy study. We expect to have the draft study available for review by late summer, and we'll present the recommended strategies at our VTA board this fall. We hope to have the opportunity to come back here and share with you the update and present the strategies in the fall. Please check out our website, our project website, for more information and sign up through the link on the screen to receive project updates. And we'd welcome you to attend all of our upcoming outreach events. This concludes our presentation, and we look forward to answering your questions and discussing how we can engage and collaborate as we finalize our transit-oriented communities strategy study.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Council, questions from the council? Councilmember Davis.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. It was a little enlightening because you have a different view for us when you passed Brokaw and you went into that Apple corridor again, and you have a platform sitting up there. Did you buy that land through acquisition, or what is, can you tell me? That was one of our previous questions.
Yeah, so the property you're referring to in the environmental document 335 Brokaw, we have not yet purchased the property. We have not yet commenced property acquisition. We are still in the early stage of taking the engineering from the 10% stage to the 30% stage. And quite honestly, until we advance the engineering and finalize the boundaries, we're not in a position to finalize the survey maps and the plats and legals and things that we need to commence the property acquisition. And I will say, and I think Jill touched on this briefly, is that, you know, aside from the fact we're going through the engineering, one of the things we're trying to do with the engineering is that the environmental document identified the maximum potential impact. We're going back and trying to see how we can tighten things up and reduce the impacts on existing properties and tenants. And so I can't say necessarily what that will be, but I will tell you that we are working very hard to understand how we can lessen the potential impact through more careful design of the project.
Okay, because I see the word conceptual, but once again, we keep asking that question. If we become the terminus, how are you going to make that function if you didn't, have the land acquisition in that corner of Brokaw? So, okay, that was one. And another question was, when you brought up federal funding, okay, so projected federal funds of $1.3.9 billion, where in the queue do we fall? Are we in the project line? Are we in the top 10% of the project line? Are we in the bottom percent? Like, where do we fall for getting this money?
Sure. It's a great question. I'm going to give you a little bit of an answer because what we're doing is we're working with the Federal Transit Administration. They have what's called an expedited project delivery pilot program. And we're pursuing this because it's actually a different way of doing business for FT than they typically have done. If you followed phase one, we went through the typical new starts engineering process, a 2-year process. It's a very defined process, as you're suggesting. Expedited project delivery, or EPD, is not like that. Because it's a pilot, FTA both reached out to us and encouraged us to participate in it. They conducted a request for expressions of interest last November, and we submitted to that. What we're waiting to hear from them is acceptance into the program. The reason we're pursuing this is compared to New Starts, which is a 2-year process. For the EPD program, if we submit our application in April of 2020, they are committed or required by law to give us a full funding grant agreement if they approve it within 120 days. And so the time savings there is very significant in terms of securing the federal funding. Now, having said that, part of the challenge is that it's a pilot program and FT has not done this before. So they haven't developed regulations and guidance. To be quite honest, they're sort of figuring out themselves, and we're talking to them as they figure it out. And so we're having that dialogue, but I can't reduce it down to we're in the upper 10% or we're ranked a certain way, because we're part of 8 submittals they've received, and we're kind of having this discussion with them about what are the next steps and how they're going to do it.
Okay, because my concern is, would part of their criteria be ridership, where the station is located? Because most of our businesses seem to be a little bit north. And to me, I mean, the BART station should be up by Levi Stadium, because that's where our jobs are. So to me, that extension would be significant for the city of Santa Clara.
Right.
And that's why I was wondering, like, what are they looking for? Are they looking for the ridership? I mean, what is it that they're going to check the boxes for us to be part of this funding? So,
I think they're looking at ridership, but the significant feature of the EPD project is that the federal share is capped at 25%, which is how we got to the numbers that we have. And the other part of this is they're looking for public-private partnerships. And so actually the transit-oriented development is part of the public-private partnerships they're looking for. And so what we're talking about doing is exactly the kind of thing they're looking at. I would say on the other point, about sort of access, we are within the frame of the environmental document, what's been approved as the project. That's what's guiding all the engineering work going forward. When we start talking about access, obviously it's important to not just connect the immediate area, but through transit and other modes, connect to the other major employment centers in the city. And so future access planning will address the question about how we connect to the other areas, as you mentioned.
okay, because I just, and I know that the land acquisition is most of the headache, but.
There's lots of headaches.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go with most. But I just look at it as, what boxes do we need to get to get this where it needs to be? And I understand you have these meetings, and you've been working with the people that live here in, I guess, the university. I love to look at pictures and identify people that are coming to your meetings. So when I saw a lot of Santa Clara University people, one of their issues that they had was they have a land use that they want to put housing on, but then they were just shut down by San Jose for putting housing in. So these are the kind of things that they're on our borders, and we're really concerned with how does Santa Clara stand up with our border people, and they got to help us get, we got to play nice in the sandbox to get where we need to be. So.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good point. We've been working and reached out extensively to the university. I think what you just mentioned is an example where we need to take a station area perspective, because if you take a station area perspective, you may get to a different answer on some of these individual parcels than if you're just in the silo of this city says they want to do this in this particular way.
Okay, well, those are my questions. Thank you.
Other council members? Okay, I have a couple questions. So I read a couple of references on our next door and an article that appeared in Santa Clara News Online, which is one of our news sources in Santa Clara, that suggested that VTA proposed a couple of years ago to cut the Santa Clara station and the Alum Rock station. So how do you address those concerns? And if stations are cut or proposed to be cut in the future, how will that decision be made?
Right. So I think, part of the challenge is that this project goes back to 2001 when VTA and BART entered into the comprehensive agreement. And for the Phase 1 project, it took us 10 years to get to point of starting that project. And in an earlier phase of the project, there was discussion about budget and reducing stations. That idea was dropped. That was the point at which after that, we went with a Phase 1 versus Phase 2 approach. That's how we got to here today. But I also completely understand, even if things were 10 years ago, people have memories, and that creates a framework for how they think about it. I want to say as clearly as possible that this project is 4 stations. That is the approved project. That is what we're proceeding and doing. Part of the challenge that we have as go through engineering is to make the project work within the parameters of what's been approved and the funding that's available. So we do not have plans to cut stations, and we don't have criteria, and that's not something we're trying to do.
So do you have the projected ridership for each station that you can show us?
I don't have it with me, but I do know just some general statistics. For the Phase 2 extension, we're projecting 52,000 riders by 2035.
To what station?
Sorry, for the Phase 2 extension, for the entire extension, the Phase 2 extension, and for the
Do you have it by station, though?
we
Santa
can
Clara?
provide that
Can
to
we-
you.
Yeah,
We
I'd
don't
like
have
to
it with
get
me,
that.
but we can certainly follow up with staff and provide that.
Because I can't see that coming through Santa Clara, but yes, okay.
So I do know roughly 15% of the riders of that total are from the Santa Clara station.
What about Alum Rock?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we'll provide that for you.
All right, and then to follow up on Councilmember Davis's question, one of the issues that we had concern about was the fact that the land was cleared by VTA for the terminus here in Santa Clara, but then development has happened and is continuing to happen in the area that would probably be used for the BART station. So it makes sense as us as a city and also as taxpayers, whether you go and acquire / condemn property for the public use for this transportation, the BART transportation, whether you're acquiring, bare land or whether you're acquiring improved land for, a warehouse that has been, improved with $20 million worth of tenant improvements, or an apartment complex that is proposed that is going to be possibly built very shortly. So what are the plans, knowing that we have existing improvements on property for acquisition / condemnation in for the Santa Clara station, if the Santa Clara station is built?
Let me start by saying that one of the things we did last year after approval of the environmental document is the next step in the acquisition process is we had to prepare a relocation plan. And as part of that, we reached out to the affected properties and tenants. And so we spoke extensively with the tenant at 335 Brokaw. I think the number you quoted is actually a much larger number than that. So we have a very deep appreciation of what the impacts would be to that tenant. And frankly, we don't have a desire to affect that. And so really, from our perspective, we think that by shrinking the footprint on that side, working a bit more with the property that we own, we don't need to go out and acquire additional property. So really our framework is, what's the environmental document on the slide we showed, with the reduced area, more intensive use of our property, and being able to come up with a solution that does not require us to go out and get other property or approach other parties than what we identified. Now the challenge is, because we're in the middle of that, the process is we have to do the engineering, then we have to engage BART, then we have to engage the Federal Transit Administration. So it's a process to go through. I think we'll have a better answer to your question by later this year, but I do not think that we will have a need to acquire any other properties, and nothing that we're doing in terms of the future station is going to require putting a hold to any of the projects that are being proposed at this time.
We do have a project coming up in the next month or two in that general area, so that's why I'm asking the question.
Sure. And let me just go one step further and say that with respect to that property owner, that developer, we've been talking about them because we think from an access and circulation perspective, there's ways we can work with them about the road network and their project to kind of manage the traffic flow that comes in and out of Brokaw in a better way. And so we've had very cooperative discussions with them, and that's really the extent of the need we have, is how can we kind of leverage their road network to kind of create better circulation.
Thank you. So just as a follow-up, if you could give us those the projected ridership numbers, and then we can then put them on our, like a consent calendar information item for the future. Councilmember O'Neill, VTA Chair. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for.
I don't want to say anything about VTA. I sit next to her.
I don't want to be blowing spitballs at her or something. So thanks for coming in and for the presentation. And to kind of follow on some of what Mayor Gilmore was alluding to, and you kind of touched on it, both of you in the presentation, the idea that, like Jill mentioned about the facility up in Concord. So I know we've all had some conversations, and you look at the size of the piece of property the VTA owns, that is the yard, and I know that there's been, a lot of comments in the expanded community about why are we going to Santa Clara and why are we doing that? And, part of it is that property and in terms of the need, what are the values of having a facility to store railway cars and to have some maintenance there. So maybe one thing you could touch on that a little bit. And then also, like when you were talking about Concord, we've also had some discussion, and there's some allusion to in some of the comments that were made, what opportunities, like when you were talking about the expanded opportunities for transit-oriented development, could there be to build on top of the yard or to meet the requirements to be able to have the maintenance and the storage facility, and also have, so it's not, like, once again, people saying Santa Clara gets to look at the, the maintenance facility for the next 50 years. What might that be? And they still make the idea where people have been saying, is this a redundant, considering that Caltrain is going to be running there and running to Diridon, do we need to have this spur come to Santa Clara? So maybe if you could kind of touch on some of those points. And it was kind of a mishmash of things there.
Sure. So as you mentioned, the maintenance facility is needed to operate the extension. And so, again, we are in a very conceptual level of engineering, but based on our environmental document, we think there's a need to store up to 200 BART vehicles, also to provide the maintenance of revenue and non-revenue vehicles. And so it is essential to the operation of the extension.
And I think on the other two items you mentioned, part of what we're looking at is when you look at the Newhall yard, it's a large area. And to be honest with you, for the construction staging, and this is not an engineering discussion, but I'll use the technical term, literally muck, the stuff that comes out of the tunnel needs to be spread out and dried before it's removed to another location. So we'll probably use every square foot we have. But when we get to the point of designing the yard, that's where we're trying to think about what is that potential smaller footprint. So I'm not sharing this as something we've decided, but I'm just sharing this with you as the engineering work we're going through right now, is we are thinking about what is the opportunity to potentially pull the footprint back from Brokaw in a way that might allow us to do additional development on our property, subject to city approval, of course, but also what are the opportunities to look at decking in that area in a way that might kind of allow development to kind of more easily fit and kind of be between the two sides of the track. So these are items that we're looking at right now. We're trying to see if that works, and I'm being very honest with you that this is something we're considering, but we haven't finished the engineering, and so this is the process that we're in. But I think we're hopeful that with that work and creating more transit development closer to the track area, and then also having the other development, you're going to go from a situation where the yard is this very visible thing to essentially in the future, the yard is kind of more surrounded by this development, and that's how you think of the area. I think the last point you brought up, we read the blogs, we see what people are saying, and I think it misses several things. One is that when we analyze the project in terms of the need and justifying the need to the federal government in terms of environmental analysis, Phase 2 is a project that has 4 stations. I think that as we've talked about, from a functional perspective, we have to bring tracks to Santa Clara just to make the end of the line condition work. But beyond that consideration, we do think there's a substantial TOD opportunity at the Santa Clara station, and we think it would be a missed opportunity. To be honest, I think that some of the blog posts we see miss the consideration that BART is fast, frequent service throughout the day that supports dense development around it. Caltrain is great service, but it does not operate as frequently as BART. And if you look at the rate structure, Caltrain is probably going to be 50% or more expensive than a BART ride if you think about between Santa Clara and Diridon. And I think all of those considerations spell to Caltrain is an important transportation partner. The connection between BART and Caltrain is important, but it makes all kinds of sense to have a BART station in Santa Clara as well as the one at Diridon.
Thank you, Councilmember Chahal, and then Councilmember Watanabe after that.
My question regarding the funding part of it, almost 25% of that is not coming from the local funding, like from the federal. And I'm not sure down the line what are the chances of getting that and how sure we are. Do we have any backup plans, like what happens if we do not get that? Do we cut a phase? Do we cut one of the stations?
So the 25% is actually a very low share historically in terms of the federal share in transportation projects. So we're already aligning this project with where the federal government is going, is to see a much larger local share versus a smaller federal share. And if you look at the fact that taxpayers in Santa Clara County have voted 3 different measures to support this project, I think it speaks to the local support that the federal government is looking for. But obviously, we have to go through an application process. I think that if for some reason there's changes to the funding or there's different issues, we'll come back and we'll revisit that. But we don't think that I mean, it's hard to speculate about what might happen. I think we're on a path where we think we will be successful, and we're getting, I think, support from the Federal Transit Administration in terms of the scale of what we're doing and how we're approaching it. If we find ourselves in that situation, we will deal with it at that time. But I don't think the solution would be to sort of start cutting the service, because the service works as a whole, is to find other ways to close whatever future gap there is between project expense and project revenues.
And my next question is like, we are working on some specific area plans for the north side of Santa Clara, which are quite projected high-density housing. Are there any plans put forward that we make better connectivity from Santa Clara Station to all those developments? Do you have that projections with you?
Absolutely. So one of the components that Ron mentioned of the Transit-Oriented Communities Strategy Study is access planning. And we're underway, and this is an extensive body of work that we're working with the city to ensure, great connection. And one of the areas in which we're coordinating closely on is with the city's downtown precise plan, I believe, that's getting kicked off. So we're working closely with staff on that as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you. Just to tag on to that, there was a provision put in a plan that we approved for City Place, a study for their Tasman, and because you've got that intersection with where the ACE train and Amtrak. So would you be trying to coordinate with the multimodal study that's going to be taking place there as well to work on connecting the north side and the projected development to the downtown?
Yes, we will be.
Great. Okay, good. Then there was something that you mentioned, Jill. You mentioned the storage for the 200 BART vehicles. What do you think the footprint is going to be or required for that?
Yeah, so the Newhall yard is roughly 40 acres, and we have very high-level conceptual plans, and so we have a lot of work to do to be able to provide information on the exact configuration or where the facilities will be or where the location of the shops will be. That's information that and work to be done over the next year.
Okay. And what is the timeline, the anticipated timeline to open this great station?
So to open the station?
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, this year we are advancing preliminary engineering, which will refine our project schedule. Mm-hmm. So that is the phase that we're in now, to be able to, in a year's time, be able to submit that schedule to the Federal Transit Administration. Based on our environmental document and past planning efforts, the earliest would be 2026. But we expect to update that project schedule in a year's time when we submit to the Federal Transit Administration.
Great. Yeah, because, I mean, there is definitely a lot projected, for that area in terms of development. So I foresee it definitely being a successful station. For the BART parking, you have 500 spaces. Is that realistic? I mean, we're in a mode these days of trying to cut down on use of cars. 500
Yes.
seems like a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would like to say that VTA is very interested in working with the city, and we're interested in pursuing shared parking strategies. Okay. So the 500 BART parking spaces was a result of our travel demand model, which is an FTA model that really tells us how much parking is needed, but we're very interested in pursuing shared parking.
Okay,
Anything
good.
to add, Ron?
I'll just add to that, for the TOD study, we're very much trying to think about parking districts and actually shared access districts that make more efficient use of parking. And so typically, if you think about BART garages, they're busy during the day with commuters, but they tend to be empty in the evenings. And so one of the things we're looking at in the future is where opportunities for sharing that, especially with future residential development and so on.
Good, good, okay. And then just there was a question about, well, you mentioned the expense of BART versus Caltrain. And will there be any kind of consideration or incentives to get people to, or, you know, some kind of train passes to get them to utilize the public transportation? And
So I think there's a couple layers to that. Just in terms of the provision of the service, BART is responsible for the provision of the service and the pricing, just like when you travel on BART anywhere else in the system. So that'll really be up to BART. You know, our arrangement is that they operate the system, and then we are responsible for any funding shortfall between the fare box revenue and the cost of the operation. I think that I would say that part of the goal of putting the TOD in here is that when you have a mix of uses, when you have substantial office and residential and retail and destination uses, that is the incentive for people to want to come to the Santa Clara station by BART.
great, okay, okay, thank you. And then I would imagine that you would probably, you're looking at the first mile, last mile as well, and ways to achieve that goal.
Yes, yes.
Connecting.
And that's part of the future access planning.
Right, okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Councilmember Hardy?
Thank you. The struggle is way back when, we should have had BART go all the way around. And the history of San Mateo turning it down and Santa Clara pulling out after that, I hope we have a better vision now. The struggle is, in 2007, when I was on the Planning Commission, the last thing I worked on was seeing the possible conceptual station. And as Mayor Gilmore mentioned, we looked at that and then we're told it's not going to happen. So that's why you have a problem here with people thinking it's not going to happen. And there's some damage control that needs to happen because of that. From a connection point of view, it makes so much sense. To have that vision that wasn't had before. So I think that's our biggest struggle here, is convincing people that it's going to happen, that we're going to build it and it's not going to disappear out of the project. And I think the process here and the public that's watching, that's important for them to hear that.
I appreciate that, and obviously, you know, history is something that's always with you. What my hope is when we come back this fall, once we have the study completed and we kind of flesh out a lot of these ideas and talk about what we envision and what we hope to work with the city and others to create, that will really speak to our seriousness about this opportunity and that we are committed to the station and the opportunity for both the BART service and the TOD around it.
Thank you. I just have 2 follow-up questions before we go to the public. The first is, with the 25% federal funding, do we need a greater local match for that? How does that work?
Well, we already have the greater local match. In other words, when we started the EPD process, the project was actually a little bit less than 75% in terms of local share. We found ways in terms of cost and additional revenue sources to get it to 75%. So we are already at one of the highest local shares of really any project that has been looked at in terms of a transit project.
Okay. And then you just mentioned that you're looking for 500 parking spaces and some kind of cooperative work with the city of Santa Clara. I'm just wondering where in the world we would find 500 parking spaces around that
Let me be clear.
Potential project. So maybe you can clarify that, because that's
Sorry.
the first I've heard of that.
So we are committed through the environmental document to build a 500-space garage for the BART station, for the BART transit riders who drive as part of the mitigation. That is part of the project. What I was trying to speak to is, beyond having the BART parking, that same structure can be used by others than BART parkers, particularly in the evenings and weekends. And so really what we would be interested in exploring with the city down the road is, what are ways that the zoning code can support shared parking, a parking district approach that doesn't get rid of the 500 space garage that we're obliged to build, but really maximizes its use throughout the day and the evening and the weekend, so we get maximum potential use out of that garage.
So is that garage proposed for your the 40-acre Newhall site?
Again, that's part of what we're trying to go with the engineering is kind of where we exactly site the garage. And so I can't tell you where it's going to go because we're in the middle of working through all those issues.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions from the city council. I do have a card from the public, and maybe other members of the public would like to speak. The first I have Suds Jane, if you'd like to come forward, and then after that, I don't have any other cards, so if you'd like to queue up if you have a comment or a question on this item. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm an old Quad resident and the representative to the BART Community Working Group. I regularly attend the CWG meetings, and I took the tour of the Concord maintenance facility. It was very quiet, very clean. These statements that I have here do not represent the view of the Planning Commission. So the Milpitas BART station is planning for 7,500 housing units. But VTA estimates that this area can support about 8,400 housing units. So the maximum throughput of a freeway lane is 200 cars per hour. Santa Clara has plans to add 29,000 housing units, which means at least 60,000 new residents. If all of those people commuted evenly 24 hours per day on 101, that would require 2.5 extra lanes added to 101 in each direction. And according to the California Policy Center, adding a freeway lane to an urbanized area is $64 million per mile. So we need to build high-density housing near this new BART station. In my mind, there's essentially zero possibility of dropping the Santa Clara station because BART feels Santa Clara is the best place for the maintenance and train storage, which is the end of the line. And so I'm just urging that we try to build as high density housing as we can, and we build basically a sense of place there, so there should be activities there. It should be an activity center along with the housing, and that the parking lot, the 500 spaces, should be shared with the commercial. So in the evenings, people can shop there, and maybe residents can park in that lot, and then during the day, it would be opened up to BART riders. Thank you.
Thank you. Come forward. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be quick because I know you guys have a lot on your agenda. So I've met with BART a few times. My name's Adam Thompson, president of the Old Quad Residents Association. And this is a very interesting project, obviously, for the Old Quad in the downtown. And we see this as, among the other projects that you guys had mentioned, the complexities of putting all these pieces together is very difficult. And the general plan really calls out for an area station plan. And I'd like to see a specific plan before we start putting pieces in place without the whole holistic vision of what our station looks like. We could really use an awesome, fabulous place. And we don't want to make the same mistake we've, unfortunately have made in the past with like our downtown, where we get kind of ahead of ourselves and then end up with kind of a hodgepodge. So thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, seeing none. Councilmember Davis? It's just a note and file.
I know I'm big on the money thing. So if the federal funding doesn't come in, are we going to look at another property tax to finish the project?
Again, I wouldn't want to speculate on measures. We think we've got a project plan and a funding plan that's going to make the funding happen. We think we're going to get this from the federal government. If for some reason that doesn't happen, we're going to revisit that and figure out how to close the gap between funding and resources. But it particularly appreciate that, if you find ourselves in that situation, I can't really sit here and speculate about what that would be. But the goal would be, and the way we would approach it is, how do we close that gap that ends up delivering the project that we said we would build when we did the planning and we approved the environmental document?
Well, it's because of the length of time. And I have to go with Councilmember Hardy with, we've been hearing about this for so long. And then when the original application came, and they went back to DC to advocate for the funding for transportation, we weren't on that little thing. Santa Clara was not listed. So that was one of the things that we were kind of like, well, wait a minute. You know, you're asking our residents to pony up money, but you're not going to put us, and then we became the terminus. So that's why we're kind of asking our questions a little bit harder, I guess, because we're really concerned, is the project really going to get there? When is it going to get there? How is it going to be funded? And Adam Thompson brought up a great point. We want to plan the right thing in the right space, because we don't have a lot of space really to give away. And it depends on who owns the land. And like I said, it has to be a little bit more regional, because it's a border thing that we're dealing with. Because the other side of that you're talking about is San Jose. So when they have all that office space that's being built right now next to Avaya Stadium, that's 500 parking spaces right there during the daytime. So I'm just wondering, I think we need to talk more into getting into the minutia with some of the people here to get the product. So I really agree with more committee meetings and community meetings and stuff, so that it's easier for people to understand what's going to happen in that neighborhood, so.
I think that's a great suggestion, and I think we're ready to come back and talk with you as a council, as well as continue our work with the community to talk through these details and kind of let people know where we are, so there's some confidence about the approach that we're taking.
And it's always going to be about the funding. They're going to want to know how much they got to invest, so, okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you both very much. We look forward to receiving that information. And with that, I don't think we take any action on this, correct? Right. So thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on with our agenda. The next item we have is reports of action taken in closed session. Acting City Attorney.
Good evening, Mayor Gilmore, members of the City Council. My name is Alexander Abbey. I'm the Assistant City Attorney. I'm sitting in for Mr. Doyle tonight. At 3:45, the City Council held a closed session. Although there are 2 items listed on the agenda, the first item, 19489, was postponed to a future meeting. For the second item, 19490, conference with labor negotiators, there was no reportable action taken.
Thank you very much for that report. Next, we have continuances and exceptions, and I think
I have
there
one.
is a request. Councilmember Davis.
Yes, Mayor, could you indulge me with our representatives from the Korean sister city, Friendship City? And I see quite a few people there, so I would like to move item 5 under public hearing up right after, I think we can we get through special order business first?
Yes, so 2C.
Okay.
Move item 5 up
5.
to 2C.
Correct.
All right, is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Motion second to move item 5 forward to 2C. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously, so we'll move that item up. Okay, that moves us on to our special order of business. The first is a follow-up presentation by Santa Clara Relay for Life. Unfortunately, the group was not able to attend tonight's city council meeting, but as such, I'd like to remind everyone that Santa Clara Relay for Life event is this Saturday, and the opening ceremony will begin at 11 a.m. At Townsend Field here at Buchser Middle School. And the team from the city of Santa Clara is called Mission City Possible, and hope to see all of you out there. We'll all be out there, and thank you, and good luck to everyone. And it's a wonderful event, and it's a heartwarming event here in the city of Santa Clara, so hope to see you all there on Saturday. And if you're not able to be there, hope you can donate in some way to Santa Clara Relay for Life. So the next item we have is item 2B, which is recognition of Silicon Valley Power's designation as a reliable public power provider, RP3 gold designation. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Or Manuel, are you coming forward to talk about that? I'll start with my prepared remarks here. So the application team, if they're here and would like to come forward so we can all see who you are. I think it's a...
And actually, if
Yes,
I could have
Manuel?
Kevin Kalinowski come up, and so he can introduce the team before you remark.
Why don't you introduce the team and then everybody can stare at them while we talk about them.
Yeah, I definitely want him to get stared at today, so that's perfect.
That's perfect, yes. How about even coming up here, maybe, and facing the audience? If you can speak in the microphone so everyone at home can hear.
Greg Garcia, Chris Carwick, Sassine Bashara, Joe Brazzoni, and Kevin Keating.
Wonderful, wonderful. So the application team consisted of dedicated employees from the electric department's administrative, engineering, transmission, and distribution T&D substations, generation resources, and control groups. The APPA RP3 program acknowledges public power providers in 4 key areas, which are reliability, safety, workforce development, and system improvements. And the application consists of compiling data from the utility in each of the 4 areas to ensure compliance with APPA's exacting standards and is supportive of the electric department's strategic plan initiatives related to benchmarking with other utilities. On April 1st, 2019, APPA notified the city of achieving the gold designation, which will last 3 years, upon which another application will be submitted. So thank you to the electric department's application team for your work, your commitment, and dedication to be recognized as a reliable public power provider. And I actually think we're the only reliable public power provider in the entire state of California. Ooh. That was an editorial comment, but thank you very much. And if you'd like to talk about the team a little bit, we'd be so happy to hear more about them.
I'm going to ask Kevin to say a few words, but before that, I've been the interim chief electric utility officer for a number of months now, and have the opportunity to work with everybody in this group, sometimes on specific projects, sometimes on specific issues, and sometimes just to talk about what they did over the weekend. And I got to tell you, there's a very impressive group, a great representation of Silicon Valley Power and the work that we do. And that service we provide every day, and I always tell them is that those things that you do every day that people don't notice, but if you weren't there, they would certainly notice right away. And this is a great representation of that great work, and it's one of the things that makes me very proud to be proud of the team. So with that in mind, I'll just ask Kevin to say a few more words.
Yes, please.
The process that was involved with this application, the application opens in May and it closes at the end of September. So this group gathered a lot of data about the metrics that the utility provides in terms of reliability, safety, and through this whole process, the positive outcome was we found areas that we want to improve in, and we are working in those areas too. We're looking to move up in the rankings. They have 3 levels. There's gold, platinum, and diamond. So our next goal is to advance. So
Fantastic. And this award lasts for 3 years?
correct. It's a designation that we can place on our business cards, and it's recognized throughout the industry as a significant achievement.
Well, I'll have to tell you, in terms of our citizens and residents of both business and residents in Santa Clara, they're so appreciative of the wonderful public power that we provide in this community. And we are so proud of what you have done and how good you make us look up here. Yeah. So thank you so much for everything you do and for providing great service to the community. Again, there almost isn't a day that goes by that I'm not complimented on our public power here in Santa Clara. And it's all because of you and the department. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so the next item we will have moved forward. And that is item 2C, which is item 5. And that is the action on Friendship City Memorandum of Understanding with Icheon City, Republic of Korea. So I'm not sure who is bringing this forward. Is it Walter?
Rossman. It's Walter, yes. Good
Thank you,
evening, Madam
Walter.
Mayor.
Yes.
And council members, if you give presentations up, thank you very much. So as you know, the city has 3 successful sister city relationships. We have the plaques right here on the wall. with Coimbra, Portugal, Izumo, Japan, and Limerick, Ireland. And now we are looking to go into the first step of such a sister city relationship, which is usually the Friendship City. Yeah, I can see. I think I have to do it this way. So Incheon City is in the Republic of Korea. It's in the center of South Korean ceramic manufacturing. It's a designated site as the UNESCO City of Crafts and Folk Art, and it's the home of several higher learning institutions and the world's second largest manufacturer of memory semiconductors. So there are a lot of similarities for us, especially on the semiconductor side, and that's why some time ago the council members have met with key representatives from the Consulate General of the Republic of Korea in San Francisco, as well as Silicon Valley Korean American Federation members. The SVKAF made a presentation regarding the Friendship City with the Culture Commission on February 5th and April 1st. There were also meetings with the Cities Association Board meeting. In an effort to bring this MOU to here today, and the reason why we went to the Culture Commission first is per our code, the Culture Commission serves as an advisory capacity to the City Council in all matters pertaining to cultural enrichment and beautification of the city, including sister city relationships and international exchanges. On April 1st, our Culture Commission recommended to the Council to enter into Friendship MOU with Incheon, and here we are today. So the Friendship City MOU is really a 3-year MOU in front of you in the packet. It proposes exchanges in areas of common interest, to host joint activities and programs, and exchange of representatives for visits every alternate year. Specific activities we're looking at with our partners is Korean cultural event at the Civic Center in October on an annual basis, academic seminar exchange programs for middle school, high school, and university students on an annual basis, cultural and arts exchanges, as well as business information exchange, which includes possible visits to tech companies. As the next steps, if the Council approves this MOU tonight, the Mayor is scheduled to videotape a signing ceremony tomorrow in our office, which we will then send as our greetings to our partners in Korea. With this is staff's recommendation to approve the Friendship City MOU with Incheon City, Republic of Korea, and authorize the mayor to sign the MOU on behalf of our city.
Thank you, Walter. Councilmember Davis, you'd like to start us off?
Start you off. John Chung, can you please come up, and Song Ang, come on up, guys.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor and council
Good
member.
evening.
I'm Sang-an, president of Silicon Valley Korean American Federation. I'm a senior vice president of the SVKF. And
Okay.
we have several Korean members
And press,
and from the press from the Korean Daily News
SF Korea.
and sfkorean.com local online news media, and then the magazine. It's all here. And also the some Santa Clara residents here also. They are very excited to see this happening.
Well, we are as well.
Yes, we've been looking forward to this, and we thank you for coming this evening and all our guests here. And we also, I brought this out for the mayor because she wasn't, you gave that to me to give to the mayor. So we wanted to
give
get
to
that
to give to the
officially.
city. To give to the city.
Oh, yeah,
But,
yeah.
so we wanted to officially put it
I can
on
yes.
record here that she did receive it. So
Thank
anyway,
you.
but thank you so much for coming, and we're looking forward to this relationship. And so I would like to make staff recommendation as a motion, but I think there's a few other people here who would like to say something, so I'll move it on. But I will make the motion for staff recommendation to approve the 3-year MOU with Incheon City.
Great,
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Watanabe and then Vice Mayor Mahan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, John, and thank you, Song, for being here this evening and for bringing your Korean delegation. We over the last, I think it's been about 6 months, we've had several meetings, and you've already engaged the city of Santa Clara in attending some Korean events, just to introduce us and give us the exposure to see what all, the Korean culture is all about, and we really appreciate that. And we, Santa Clara is all about culture, it's all about diversity, and there is a big Korean Korean culture here in our city, and we look forward to the opportunity of just developing this relationship and exchanging ideas and just continuing to see it grow. So thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to the Sister City meeting and talking, to the board, and again, expressing, your desire to really establish this relationship in the city of Santa Clara. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Mahan?
I really do want to welcome you and thank you for reaching out to us to finally get this Friendship City relationship established. I know we worked for many, many years. Korean businesses have been long in Santa Clara, very successful, very, very prosperous, have contributed so much to Santa Clara through your business organizations, through your culture. And it's been a very long time that you've been here. In fact, I remember when we wanted to establish the Korean Business District in Santa Clara. And I understand that our section of El Camino is known in Santa Clara for all of the business contributions that you have made. So this is a very important step for Santa Clara. As you see, we're pretty selective. We have 3 sister cities.
Yeah.
And this will be our 4th in time to come, I'm quite sure, because the relationship between our city and yours, between our residents and yours and your culture, is a very strong one. And we do appreciate all the contributions you make to our community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Chahal?
Welcome, and thank you for this opportunity to sign up Friendship City. And this is not only good for city as such over here, but it's so good for the youth of both the cities. When they travel to each other, exchange students, they learn so much from real life and real cultural exchanges they do over there. So looking forward to have a great relationship down the line, and welcome again. Thank you.
We're looking forward to it too. Thank you.
Thank you. When I met with you a few months back and we talked
Yeah.
about this, and it just seemed like a real natural for Santa Clara to say yes to this, to have the Friendship City, and to get further involved in the Korean culture. The Korean people of Santa Clara have been part of our community for many, many years, and they're citizens of Santa Clara. They're part of us, and we feel a great love and connection with. And so this is a real natural for us to take the next step to do this, and I'm really excited about it. Really, really excited to learn about the Korean culture. The food is phenomenal. It's lovely. I love it. And everything about it is just wonderful. I just have to tell the city manager, though, we need to remodel the city council chambers to put the flag, because we need more space.
Yes.
So that might have to be part of the motion to make more space. But one thing at a time, one step at a time. But we're very, very pleased and excited about this. So I'm confident the council's going to
Thank you.
take action to move ahead, and I'll be able to make the taping to send back to Korea, and we can move ahead.
And also
Yes.
the mayor of Icheon will be here on about July time.
July.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll be
And
ready.
we'll meet together again.
Okay,
Coming in
well,
for the visit.
Yes.
Yes.
we'll make the preparations and be ready for
Yes.
him. Him.
Yes.
We'll be ready for him. Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to say anything? How about if we
Approve it.
Let's approve it first, and then if we could take a photo up
Yeah,
here
that will be good. Yes.
with the community.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, that will be good.
Okay, first, if we could have a motion on the floor, and
I
then.
made the motion. I need a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there, let's ask if there's any member of the public that would like to speak
Okay.
before we take action on this. I don't have any cards, so if you'd like to speak, please come forward. Now is the time. Say yes? Yes? Okay. Yes. Okay, so I have a motion to approve the staff recommendation to move forward with the memorandum of understanding. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously, 7-0. This is the beginning of a new era. Congratulations. Thank you. So if we could all come up here, everyone's welcome to come up. We'll take a photo.
Ready? Okay.
I like that. I'm excited. I'm excited. Oh, that's what's in there. This is May 18th. Thank you, everyone, for having patience with us. All right, going back to the regular agenda. Our next item is the consent calendar. All items are approved with one motion unless an item is pulled for consideration and further discussion. I would just have to say for the record, I'm abstaining on item 3P as in Paul, because it's regarding the El Camino specific plan. And I know that a letter has gone to the FPPC regarding Councilmember Chahal, Councilmember Hardy, and myself regarding our ability to vote on it. But until we get some answer on that letter, I'll be abstaining. I'm sure the other two are abstaining on 3P as well. So, which one? Oh, did I miss one? Okay, 3M is Salary Setting Commission. Oh, 3N? If there's anything to do with 3M and with the Franklin Mall, I'll be abstaining on that too. I didn't see it, but if there is, I'm abstaining on that. Thank you for thinking of me. Okay. Okay, Councilmember Hardy, would you like to pull an item?
Well, that was my point.
Okay.
To see that and that I needed to abstain.
On the 3P.
3P.
Okay, same with Councilmember Chahal on 3P. Councilmember O'Neill.
I'd like to pull item 3P.
Okay. So item 3P will be pulled.
Okay.
And when it is, the three of us will leave the dais and Vice Mayor Mahan will take over. Is there any other item to be pulled from the consent calendar? Any item from the public? Be pulled?
All right, motion to
Okay.
approve the balance of the consent calendar.
Balance of the consent calendar? Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have public presentations. Are there any cards for public presentations? Okay, the first I have is Howard Myers. If you'd like to come forward. Welcome.
Mayor, council member, staff, Howard Myers, longtime resident. I'm concerned about the SB 50 and SB 330 at the state level where they want to take over and tell us how to run our town, tell us where to build, what to build, and when to build it. Now, as individuals, we've been, sending letters, calling our representatives, putting on Facebook, next door. I got an email list telling everybody to do the same thing. What I want to do is ask the city to also help with this. I'd like the city to help us fight this, try not to get it passed. If it does pass, I would like the city to get together with other local governments and fight this in court. Because it just isn't right to have them come in and take over like they want to do. At the state level, we get this CASA compact is just waiting for the teeth to sink in, take our money and tell us what to do. That's just insane. We shouldn't let that happen. We can end up, people think, oh, the city looks disorganized or kind of patchwork here and there and the other thing. Can you imagine what it look like when it's being run by the DMV? This is insane. So we're asking the city to help us with this fight. And as long as I have 1 minute and 47 seconds, I want to tell you, I think this idea of the abstaining is insane. Because what ends up happening, somebody's in my district, they're supposed to represent me, we have a lot of things in common. That's kind of the reason for the districts. But if it's something that I care about and my representative cares about, well, they can't vote on it because it might affect them. Well, of course. They're in my district. It should affect them. It should affect me. They represent me. This is insane. Again. Anyway, this recusing, it's getting out of hand. It's just getting out of hand. It's, who's going to vote? Well, the only person that can vote is one that doesn't give a darn. How about people that have skin in the game? The recusal is reducing a lot of the representation that we need. So I hope you win that. And if you don't, fight. Thank you.
Well, we're certainly going to do that, Howard. You know that. So, thank you. Yes, if anyone else, I don't have any other cards, please come forward.
Good evening. I just wanted to point out, I don't know if the timer started. Okay, I just want to point out that yesterday was Earth Day and that this Thursday the city will have its Arbor Day, Earth Day Festival from 10 to 2 in Central Park. And I encourage all of the members of the public to come out for that. Mostly it's a bunch of school kids learning about water conservation to turn off the tap while they're brushing their teeth. I want to remind adults to do the same thing. Earth Day was started in 1970 as a result of the Santa Barbara oil spill, which killed about 10,000 sea lions and birds and so on. And so, climate change is proving to be an existential threat to human civilization. And the IPCC says that we have about 11 years left to really get control of our carbon emissions, to stay below 1.5 degrees. It's not very much time, and I just want to encourage the city to really take bold action on our climate action plan, which is now going out to bids for consulting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. The other thing is that I sit on Planning Commission, and often I see houses being redeveloped, and there's no street trees. And there doesn't seem to be any policy, and this is Arbor Day coming up on Thursday. There doesn't seem to be any policy requiring street trees when single-family homes are redeveloped, nor is there any requirement for irrigation to those trees. So I've seen trees on my street that the city will plant and then will die because the homeowners aren't irrigating them. So I would like to see some policy to require some form of irrigation to those street trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please come forward. Good evening.
Hi, Richard Benito, longtime resident. I'm here also about SB 50 and SB 330. I can't imagine you want to give up control of the city, regardless of the result. I just wanted to let you know, I already sent a letter in, but I just want to let you know that I support your fight, and hopefully you push for it and join with whatever city or whatever municipality you can to take care of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you for the public presentations. The next item we have is a consent item pulled for discussion, and that would be regarding the El Camino Real item 3P. So I'm going to turn it over to Vice Mayor Mahan to run this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember O'Neill, you pulled this item from the consent calendar, so we'll start with your questions or comments.
Okay, I would just I wanted to have the staff kind of go through the recommendations, because I know that there has been a fair amount of interest in this, and I just want people to be aware of, because I wasn't aware until I read the report, what was actually going to be studied, and so it looks like staff is prepared to.
Perfect, thank you. We'll go to Mr. Crabtree then.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of council. I'm Andrew Crabtree, Director of Community Development, and with your indulgence, we have a hopefully brief presentation to help clarify what this is about. As you are aware, the city is in the process of preparing a specific plan for the El Camino Real corridor. The intent of the specific plan is to help implement the general plan vision that calls for the redevelopment, eventual redevelopment of the corridor from some low intensity commercial uses to higher density mixed use consisting of residential and commercial uses. And through the specific plan process, our goal was to really come up with design standards that would help this new development to be compatible with the neighborhoods. Going through that process, well, I should also mention that the specific plan is being funded by a grant that we received from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC. That's the primary source of funding for the work that's being done by staff and the consultant, MIG, that the city has hired to help us with this process, and that grant has a performance deadline that requires completion of the specific plan by June 30th of 2020. We have a scope with the consultant that was approved by the City Council that's also relevant to our discussion here today. As part of the specific plan process, we had a study session with the City Council in February. And at that study session, we asked the City Council to review two primary items that would sort of allow us to go forward with the planning process. One was a draft land use plan that showed proposed land use designations along the corridor. And the other was a preferred right-of-way, roadway design alternative that shows possible changes within the street design for El Camino Real. Also at that council meeting, the council went ahead and agreed that we should go forward with those two items as proposed, but the council also requested that we staff provide information regarding the work and costs required to study an additional right-of-way design referred to as Alternative 3A. Just to review, this is the draft land use plan that the council reviewed at the meeting. There are primarily 3 designations along the corridor. The purple color, regional commercial, is the highest intensity of the 3, with supporting commercial or mixed-use development. The dark red color is a mixed-use designation. It could be residential or residential and commercial. In some locations where there are some dots, it's required to have ground floor commercial. And then the orange color represents a lower density, primarily residential designation along the corridor. This is the roadway design alternative that was presented to the council as coming through the process as sort of the preferred alternative, and the council also agreed that we should go ahead and study this roadway alternative. This illustration here depicts 3 travel lanes in each direction. At this particular, it also shows a left turn pocket on the right-hand side here, so indicating that this is at an intersection where there's a left turn pocket provided. And this designation primarily changes from the current conditions in that it includes the elimination of on-street parking along El Camino Real, and then that area that becomes available is being repurposed to provide a separated bike lane, in some cases boarding islands for the buses that run on El Camino Real. And then we also anticipate some enhanced landscaping to be provided as redevelopment occurs along the corridor. So that's the roadway alternative that council approved and said we should go forward with for the purpose of analysis. Of course, it's not approved yet, and that the specific plan, there's still work to be done, but this is where this is our starting point. This is another alternative that came up through the outreach process that was conducted for the specific plan. We refer to it as Alternative 3A, and this is significantly different in that it includes the removal of a travel lane in each direction. This illustration shows you have 2 travel lanes in each direction. Again, a left turn pocket is shown here in this illustration, so there's 3 on the right-hand side. And by removing that travel lane, the additional space that becomes available, a lot of it is, some of it, I should say, is given over to the median to increase the size of the median so there can be more landscaping. There's also, as with the other alternative we just looked at, separated bike lanes and boarding islands for buses, but this allows for wider sidewalks on either side of the roadway and actually decreases the amount of land dedication that would be required from adjacent properties. So it sort of narrows the street overall, brings the landscaping, street trees on either side closer together, and would have landscaping would be more sort of visibly prominent with this alternative. So to respond to the request from the council, we looked at what would be required in terms of times and costs to add the analysis of this alternative into our specific plan process. And the first thing that we would need to do would be a traffic analysis to look at the impacts of removing those travel lanes, and anticipate what, that would certainly have impacts or effects on the traffic flow, and we would need to understand what those would be. So we consulted with consultants that perform this work, and the approximate cost would be $120,000 for that additional analysis. And since it's not part of our current scope, it would add about 3 months to our project timeline to have that analysis prepared. And then along with that, we would certainly want to conduct additional community outreach once we have the results of that analysis so that we could present that information to the community and community members, understanding the anticipated or expected impacts would be able to provide input to us. We also would expect to do some additional coordination with our adjacent cities that share El Camino Real with us, Sunnyvale and San Jose, Caltrans, which has authority here, the Valley Transportation Authority, which does run buses on the El Camino Real as well. And you should note that, this additional outreach would is anticipated to primarily be conducted by city staff, so it does have an impact on our staff workloads. If there was involvement of consultants, there would be additional costs beyond what we just discussed for that. So the budget implications of this, the funding that we have for the El Camino Real specific plan in our approved budget does include, as should most of our projects, a contingency amount of about $159,000. Although it's certainly our experience that as the plan progresses, particularly through the environmental review process, that there are demands that make use of that type of contingency funding. Also, with the performance deadline of June 2020 and the additional 3 or 4 months that we would need to do the technical analysis and outreach, we could go beyond the time frame in which we can draw from the MTC funding. So, staff's conclusion is that additional city funds would be required to complete this work. Should also note that at the dinner that was recently conducted with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee and City Council, as part of that discussion, BPAC members requested that the city go forward now with removal of the parking on El Camino Real. And this is because the city is about to go through a process with Caltrans of repaving El Camino Real. And so the desire is that when that repaving occurs, the city could at that point implement the removal of the on-street parking and the addition of the bike lanes in some configuration. Our intent as staff was to, before we implement anything like this, conduct study, have more outreach, and ultimately have the council approve something as part of an El Camino Real plan that would then get implemented. But this request was made and we're being reported out to the city council. So with that, staff's recommendation is that we note and file the informational report that responds to the information that was requested by the council. And then if council would like to proceed with analysis of the removal of the travel lane on El Camino Real, you should provide direction to staff to return to council with a formal scope and budget for consideration. With that, available to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council members? Yes, Councilmember O'Neill.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. So Andrew, before I get into the alternatives, I wanted to take this opportunity because there have been some letters that have come in and some of them were directed to the planning staff and the council was copied. And so I want to I think there's some misunderstandings in the community. So the El Camino specific plan, the scope is just the properties that front onto El Camino. It's not residential properties that may be in blocks behind the El Camino. Is that correct?
So, right, this colored area shows the properties that we're specifically addressing through the specific plan. Those boundaries were identified in the general plan update in 2010 as the El Camino Real focus area. So that's, and it does consist almost entirely, with some exceptions, of properties that front onto El Camino Real. City Hall is one of the exception areas. The Moonlight Lanes bowling alley, which is a project under construction, I believe, is another one. But generally, apart from that, I think there's one or two other small properties that aren't fronting. But it's generally just the properties fronting onto El Camino Real. There's no proposal to change anything back into the neighborhood, although we want to engage people from those neighborhoods, certainly in the outreach process, so they're aware of what's going on.
Certainly, because I know one of the messages indicated that the residents that are in the neighborhood, say behind what we all call the Smart and Final shopping center, that property was going to be included in the plan, and those properties were scheduled for eminent domain. So I would like to take this opportunity to assure those residents that their properties are not scheduled to be eminent domain to be included in the El Camino plan. So, that's correct.
And just to be extra clear, there's no proposal for eminent domain on anything in this plan, whether it's in the plan area or not.
Because I don't want people to be, fearful that something's about to drop on them and their homes are going to be taken away from them. Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. I hear your point. I mean, so I'm at least, and I'd be very curious to hear, because I see some of my colleagues in the bicycle community out in the audience, and the PEDs also. I'm pleased at least that we're doing alternative 2A. I think that that's definitely a step in the right direction. And, I would have been curious to see what might have come out of 3A, just to see how the results or the data might have been different. But, I understand that we don't have the funding for that. So, of course, I'm, willing to go ahead and do 2A. But, perhaps at some point in the future, we might be able to consider something. Because I definitely think if we went to something like 3A, we talk about wanting to have a walkable area. Well, part of some of the things we've talked about, that El Camino is so wide that even people crossing it oftentimes feel at risk. If at least if at some of the intersections you had like some bulb outs, so that to make the crossing distance a little shorter. But I do understand what you're saying about the grant and the time periods. So I do appreciate at least that additional information, and I'll be curious to see what some of the other folks have to say. So thank you.
Councilmember Davis?
Thank you. So I guess, Andrew, one of my problems I'm having is since we did this last study session, and some of the people have kind of made comments to the fact that, did we actually consult businesses about taking away the on-street parking? Did the Chamber of Commerce engage in any of these people?
So we did a parking analysis to identify properties that would be most affected, and we did a noticing to the entire corridor and the properties along it, and we did have participation from or conversations with some of the property owners that would be affected. We certainly are aware that there are concerns about that, and then it's our intent to do further outreach as we go forward. It was really, is this the plan that we want to keep forward? The council has not made a decision yet on the plan. I want to be very clear about that, right? So this is just for the purposes of what to analyze, and have, like traffic analysis and so forth in hand, so that we can do more informed outreach going forward.
Okay, because they're very concerned that you're taking it away, because I think that there was some information out there that we were going to take away the off-street parking for them. They would not have any parking. The other problem that they had was, and I took a drive up and down, just in Santa Clara, and so many people park on the El Camino Real. They don't seem to interfere with anybody. They're just parking there. So they were really concerned, like we were just going to take it away from them and they were never going to get it back. So I think that we need to be a little bit more in the communication spirit and let them know we're analyzing this, and they will be contacted and we will get through the process. But I think that right now they're afraid that when the paving hits, that it's gone. So I don't know how to address that issue. I guess more of letting them know.
And I should add that we do have representation of the Chamber of Commerce and the Korean Chamber of Commerce on our Citizen Advisory Committee that's been a part of these discussions. And we specifically identified 3 properties, 5 businesses that don't appear to have sufficient on-site parking at all, that would be the most impacted.
Okay, and then another issue came out of that meeting. Have we looked at alternative plans, not on El Camino, but on other streets that we have, surface streets, that we could have bike lanes and they would be less impacted by what goes on El Camino Real? So I'm getting both sides of the story here. One side wants the bicycle lanes, but we have to protect them because that scares me, because people are getting killed. The other is there another way in the city that we could reroute them to get to the same destination with avoid having problems? Are we looking at any issues, or alternatives there?
So
something that runs parallel with El Camino Real?
So I think that would be addressed through the bicycle master plan that's being prepared. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
So thank you once again, Mike Liu, Assistant Director of Public Works. So the city is engaged in a bicycle master plan. We are in the final stages where we want to bring that to our BPAC in June and hopefully to council in August for approval. It is our master plan for bicycle facilities in the city for the next 10 years, and it does look at alternative paths in terms of the directionality that you're referring to, but it is important to note that the plan does promote a bicycle lane on El Camino Real. So everything we've talked about in terms of bicycle lanes on El Camino Real is consistent with that plan, and with the community has been engaged on that. In that, unfortunately, there's not a lot of those connections that are close proximity for bicyclists in this vicinity. So as you've seen through the presentation, and you will see soon in our bicycle master plan, the city is very much in favor of a protected or a buffered bike lane along El Camino, but as part of the discussion here and in August is the need for making sure we have space. So parking is key to that proposal. So removal of parking kind of gives us the space to basically allow for the buffer. Because one of the key things, and it's a little early preview of the bike plan, is that this is our third iteration. It's been key through the surveys and the outreach that bicyclists want to use city roads. They're just not as comfortable, so they want to have enhanced facilities. And El Camino is one where I think I've heard it here at the council meeting and out there as well, that they're very concerned about biking on it just because of the speed. Obviously, the pavement condition hasn't been great for that type of riding, and then on top of that, the wide lanes and so forth.
Okay, so because when this comes back again, for me to make a decision for the greater good, you're going to have the people that park on El Camino versus the people that bicycle on El Camino, and that could be a war. But I need to know. I need data. I need the data. Just let me know who's going to be impacted the most. What is the best decision for what we have where we have it. And I'm really concerned about people getting hurt on bicycles because we have distracted drivers, and people, like I said, people are being killed, and it's not, they go to work one day and they don't come home. So I have a real problem I want people to go to work and come home. I don't want people to so a buffer zone is very important to me because I want to know how that is going to look and how we would protect people on the El Camino. Is there an alternate route? Is that more protective for them? I just need to know which is going to be the better way to go, especially knowing how many people park on the El Camino Real. Is it business? Is it people that live here? I mean, who is parking in El Camino Real? So when I drove up and down, I couldn't tell if it was a business and or a place where a residence. I don't know who's parking. So I would really like to have a lot more information to, get through the process, because I think that it might create, issue either way. But we've got to do what is better for the residents of Santa Clara. So those are just my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what Councilmember O'Neill said. I appreciate the staff going and exploring, what would it take to for alternative 3A, and putting together an informational report. I mean, it seems like if there are time constraints and if it could impact, the grant, that it would be inadvisable to proceed with it right now. But but if we could look at it later on, and still have the option to look at it later on and see if it seems like a practical solution, then I'm definitely in favor of going ahead and exploring it later on. Regarding El Camino and the bike request, the bike lanes, for the bike lanes, I mean, I understand, from attending, like the Grand Boulevard Initiative, for instance, and the Caltrains meetings, everybody wants to try and make El Camino a lot faster, get transportation moving a lot faster, and in some of those ways is by removing the parking, for instance. And so that buses just stop, they board, they unboard, and then they take off again. So, I mean, there's definitely pros and cons, but Let me ask you, Andrew, when do we expect the specific plan? What is the final plan due date on it?
Well, the deadline is June 30th of next year.
Uh-huh.
I think our plan currently, we should get to you a little bit sooner than that, but there's always potential delay as we go through the environmental review process and so forth. So we're really looking to bring the plan back to the council in early 2020.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I mean, there's definitely, I mean, there's pros and cons to all of this, and to have to, and it's important to listen to what, the residents want, and the concerns, and the BPAC committees, and because everybody has a stake in all of this, as we have a lot of stakeholders. So, anyway, well, I mean, we just look forward to seeing how the specific plan and continues to develop, and with the bike master plan coming forward as well, to see how they can all be integrated and come up with a solution. But anyway, I think that's all I have. But in terms of just going forward, I feel like it's inadvisable to hold this issue up, especially if there's grant money that could be lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crabtree. I have a question before I get to the speakers from the public. So as things stand now, we're just looking at the right-of-way alternatives that are enumerated 1 and 2. And what this report is asking us is, it's giving us information on what would be alternatives 3A and 3B, asking us if we want to add them. Is that right?
Yeah, I apologize if the naming may be a little confusing, but really we're just planning to study one alternative, which was called 2A. Originally, there was sort of like alternative 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B, so forth. So we're really just proposing to study this alternative 2A, and then the question was, should we also study a second alternative 3B? I'm sorry, 3A, also called 3A. So that's there's really just a question of one alternative, one roadway configuration or 2 roadway configurations.
And 2A does remove on-street parking.
That's
and
correct.
Accommodates the buffered bike lane with a bus boarding island. And 3A removes a travel lane in addition. Does all of those things plus remove a travel lane.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. All right. I'm going to go now to the speakers from the public. We have first John Cordes. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and council members. John Cordes speaking on behalf of Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. First off, I wanted to thank you for looking into the alternative of 3A and exploring what it would take and what the impacts may be of removing a travel lane from El Camino Real. I agree with you that that could always happen at some point in time. From a bicycling and a standpoint, both 3A and 2A include the protected and buffered bicycle lane, so we're very happy with both of those. As part of the Grand Boulevard Initiative, we're hoping that someday Santa Clara will decide that it's time to remove a lane and that we don't have that many cars there and we can get by with more buses, more shuttles, more bicycles, more walkers. So for both those reasons, we're supportive. We're glad you explored it. If you decide not to invest the money at this time, we're fine with that. We just wanted to encourage you to explore it because we think you're seeing cities up and down the peninsula, Redwood City, all of them are squeezing El Camino because they want it, and they want it for other uses than for vehicle storage and vehicle use. The other issue that came before you is about adding the bicycle lanes to El Camino Real. So what drove this is you're doing a once in a 10-year time when you're going to repave El Camino Real, right? And when you repave it, you're going to restripe it. So your bicycle master plan already suggests that you want to put bike lanes there. And so I'm saying you're already going to repave the street. Why not repave the bike lanes now instead of waiting 10 years for the next time you're going to repave the bike lanes? So you get it done right away. So that's the incentive, and that's why the BPAC forwarded that idea to you. Is you're repaving the streets already. You're going to repave them. Why not repave the bike lanes? You've already put the bike lanes on El Camino Real as your #1 project in your bicycle master plan. You haven't voted on it yet, but it's coming to you soon. And so it kind of makes sense to put those bike lanes in today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Gabriella Landaveri.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. Longtime resident, I grew up here and I now live here. So I'm avid cyclist and I take my daughter in the trailer, and I think that having at least El Camino, having a protected bike lane will be very beneficial for adults and children alike. And at the very least, I understand that the businesses have concerns about the on-street parking removal of that. There are plenty of parking lots along El Camino. You know, a lot of them are not fully used. The businesses should be able to share parking spaces so that everyone has an option, you know, to park there. And, you know, the ones that are closer to the, you know, the businesses, you know, should be reserved for folks that maybe can't walk, you know, extra, you know, 5-10 minutes, you know, handicap parking, things like that. So, and also on, cars parked along El Camino specifically, and just in roads in general, blocks visibility. So it's a hazard to drivers, to pedestrians, and to cyclists. When people are trying to pull into the driveways of businesses, they can't see pedestrians because there's parked cars blocking them. So I think it's an overall issue that doesn't just impact cyclists, and impacts drivers and pedestrians as well. So thank you.
And next we have Nikita Sinha. Welcome.
Good evening, council members. My name is Nikita Sinha. I'm an intern with Greenbelt Alliance. Greenbelt Alliance has a 60-year history as the only Bay Area organization that holistically addresses land use issues across our region. We're also a coalition member of the Santa Clara Community Advocates, a resident-led community group focused on creating and supporting thriving neighborhoods. The El Camino Real specific plan presents an exciting opportunity to create a safer environment for pedestrians and bicyclists and invite residents to use alternative modes of transportation. We support right-of-way Alternative 3A, removal of a travel lane with widened sidewalks and median. Alternative 3A will create a safe and welcome space for residents to walk and bike down El Camino Real. It allows for wider sidewalks, street trees, a protected bike lane, and a wider median. All of these elements protect pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers and decrease the potential of collisions. Multimodal transit options allow residents to decrease dependency on their cars, which benefits both the residents and the environment. When residents have the option to walk, bike, or take the bus to their destinations along El Camino Real, they reduce pollution and traffic. Reducing the number of trips made by cars will help Santa Clara reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve the quality of life for all residents. I do want to say my grandparents lived in Santa Clara for 5 years without a car. They walked and took the bus to all of their destinations. And I would love to see changes made in Santa Clara that make for a more inviting space for residents like that. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishes to comment on this item?
Linda Nepper, longtime resident. And for your point about bikers being killed, I would like to see how many drivers are killed because they can't see or they're impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Jane.
Thank you. It's good to see you here, Patty. Anyway, I just want to say that most of the accidents, the bicycle accidents in Santa Clara occur on El Camino Real. People are already biking there. And so to add protected bike lanes will just save lives. I agree that we have a great opportunity right now while we're repaving El Camino to remove the parking. The BRT analysis that VTA did earlier said that there was plenty of off-street parking, that we don't need the on-street parking on El Camino. As Director Crabtree said, there's really only about 5 businesses that depend on the parking on El Camino Real. So this is a great opportunity for us to do the striping for the bike lanes. If you go down Park Avenue, that's my favorite way to get to San Jose. They have removed the parking along Park Avenue in San Jose, and they've put a striped bike lane there. So it's a great way to get to San Jose. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Betsy Magus. I think most of the previous speakers have said what I was going to say. El Camino is one of our most dangerous corridors. We have the statistics from many years past, and the El Camino is far and away the most collisions involving bicyclists and pedestrians, which means not only is it dangerous, but people are already walking and biking there. I don't think it's going to be practical to, to try to put people on alternate routes. The alternate routes don't go through. Warburton doesn't cross Santa Mas, for example. But also, El Camino is the destination. People on bicycles are customers too. And right now, if I want to meet somebody at a Starbucks on El Camino or something like that, I have to ride on El Camino to get there. So I think it is very important that we put a protected bike lane on El Camino. And I also think that it is right now a hazard on El Camino to have parked cars there. And it's a hazard to everybody. It's a hazard because you cannot see pulling in and out of the many driveways. You can't see oncoming traffic. So I'm strongly in favor of a protected bike lane on El Camino. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hello, my name's Leroy Rodriguez, a longtime resident. I like the idea that's being proposed for 2A. I believe also it may also calm the traffic as well and be visually enhancing to everyone with the trees in the area. And it'd stimulate the economy with people wanting to go downtown on their bicycles. Also, there's the information of technology being out there with more electric bicycles that are out there right now, which more and more people I see are buying and using. So with the beautification of 2A, the buffered area with trees and all, I think El Camino would be an enhanced area for these people to use their electric bicycles and to go downtown and also to do shopping and also to enjoy the travel in between one city to another as a main artery for people to use. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Howard Myers, a longtime resident, a little longer now than last time I talked to you. As far as El Camino, I'm on the committee, and we were looking at 2A, and 3A wasn't all that popular. It was popular with some people, but most people were more interested in 2A. It's important to have some kind of a buffer for bike lanes. I understand that. I've heard some good cases for the off-street, on-street parking being gotten rid of in terms of the safety. It hadn't occurred to me that way, but I'm just glad I'm not one of the 5 people who's going to lose their business over it, because there's some of them that are really, really serious there. I hope we can find some accommodations for them. On El Camino, I know that I used to ride my bike and take a couple of dogs with me, and El Camino and other streets. And I'll tell you, I'm going to ride a bike in El Camino. I'm not crazy. I'd rather get a ticket for riding on the sidewalk than getting killed. And some serious, so I'll take my chances on the sidewalk and just make sure I yield to any pedestrians and I don't go through the busy time. But I can see the need for that. But I'm just very concerned that we don't give any consideration to removing a traffic lane, because now we're going to be pushing all that traffic down to Benton and the other side streets. That would be crazy. Maybe 10 years down the road, we'll get these shuttles running around and everything will be fine. But right now, that's not it. That's not reality. So let's not consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we are being asked to note and file this informational report on option 3A, which if we did so would mean that the study would be on option 2A, which does include the 6-foot buffered bike lane, et cetera. It just doesn't remove a line of traffic. So that is what the staff recommendation is. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
The recommendation, okay, see, this is where I'm confused. I'm not seeing.
The recommendation is to just note and
Note and file.
the study, the informational report, this is just an
The
informational
right-of-way for
report
alternate 3A.
on 3A. So if we
Okay,
note
then
and
it
file,
says, if the council would like to proceed with an analysis of the removal of the travel lane on El Camino Real, alternate 3A.
which is 3A.
Direction should be provided by staff to return to council with a formal scope and budget for consideration.
So this is just an informational item. So we can't take action. We can't direct staff at this point to go out and study 3A. If we just take the
Note and file?
note and file, then the staff will continue its study on option 2A, which does include the buffered bike lane, a boarding island, et cetera, but it retains the 3 lanes of traffic. It doesn't take away a lane of traffic as 3A would do. 2A and 3A.
Mine says 3A and 3A, so that's why I was confused. Okay.
No, no, because they already are studying 3A. So if we want them to, 2A, sorry, Andrew. If we want, no wonder you're confused.
Oh, my God.
If we
Okay.
want them to study 3A, then we would have to take that direction, and then they would come back with a more formal report upon which we could then take action.
That's
on
correct.
3A.
The sentence is in there only if, for disclosure, if you want that to happen, it has to be initiated by separate council action at a later time. This is just to note that the action and.
I was just wondering, we were talking about 3A, 2A, and then the recommendation is to note and file 3A.
3A, but 2A would go forward.
Okay. So I will second Teresa's motion.
Thank you. All right, so this would let staff go forward with 2A, note and file 3A. You can always come back with it at a later time. And lights on that motion. Whoops, no, oh, wait a minute. Oh yeah, sorry, this is mine, okay. I'm going to hit abstain for the mayor here, or do I have to? Okay. Okay, that motion passes with 4 yes votes, noting the 3 abstentions of those council members and the mayor who are absent from the dais. And now we'll go get them.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is we've been through, public hearing, general business, action on request for funding from Healthier Kids Foundation in the total amount of $210,000 for fiscal year 1920 to fiscal year 21-22 for dental, hearing, and vision screenings and case management services. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager, and Santa Clara community. The item before you is a request for funding from Healthier Kids Foundation in the amount of $210,000 for dental, hearing, vision screenings, and case management services. Previously, in 2016, Council approved 3 years of funding in the amount of $70,000 per year. The accomplishments reported to date include over 2,581 children screened for vision, 1,063 children for dental, and 976 children for hearing. They have also had close to 400 adults attend their parent ed program, 10 Steps program. As you can see, these focus on preventative health services. Staff does not have a recommendation to fund a particular organization or a specific set of services for a particular population such as preschool. But we do recommend, if health screening services are needed, that a competitive selection process could be engaged in to ensure and secure and provide services most efficiently. Could also consider funding on a reimbursement basis based on a defined price per client served. So that concludes the staff report, and I believe Kathleen is in the audience.
Director Teixeira, so I see the total amount of clients served, are those all Santa Clara residents?
Correct.
Well, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Correct.
Oh, correct, okay.
Yes.
So, did the Healthier Kids Foundation do everything that they said they were going to do in the original MOU?
So the report that you
Like
have
the-
does show some projections for this year, but my understanding, talking with staff, since they were at the Easter egg hunt this weekend, providing some services there, that they were able to meet their goals for this year as of last Saturday.
Okay, there were supposed to be children's fairs, annual children's fairs, health fairs and things like that. Did that all happen?
We incorporated that into the Art and Wine Festival, where they
Okay.
did have booths in Kids Kingdom. So again, inviting folks to come to an event that we already had was a more efficient way of delivering the same services, and also having a stream of people that you're trying to reach right there. So that's how that was accomplished.
Okay, so it looks like it's about $30 or $40 per contact that we paid for. I'm just doing some numbers of number of people served and amount of money. Is that something that's in the ballpark of services that could be provided from other organizations? I don't even know if, in context, how does this compare with anything else?
So in the original, how the provider came to you before, we did not do a competitive RFP, so I can't really address that as a question. And what we have in front of you now is similarly a proposal to provide services, and therefore the staff recommendation would be one way of securing services, or if cost is a consideration, which it is, or providing additional services or a different type of service at a lower fee, there may be other ways of securing that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Davis?
I wanted to make a motion. I believe in 2016, we didn't go out to bid on this. I think it was just something that we did. And now we have a new process in line, risk assessment and procurement. So I wanted to make a motion for the alternate number 2 to conduct a competitive selection process to source the most efficient delivery for targeted outreach and hearing, vision, and dental screening services for preschool age children. That was the direction I was going in. So I wanted to make a motion for that, for the council. I guess my thought was how can we get more kids involved, and how does the school enter into this? That's, the school district for preschool. Because I see a lot of preschool places in Santa Clara, but are they part of this thing that we have, Healthier Kids?
Again,
They are?
The Santa Clara Unified School District does have school nurses, and they do provide similar type services. Therefore, this particular agency focused on other types of programs, community programs. We have 2 preschool readiness programs in the city through recreation. There's also other providers, so they focused on those agencies and groups outside of the school district.
Okay, that's why I wanted to go for a competitive bid on the motion. Okay, that's my motion. Yes.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Okay, motion second for discussion. Any other council members? Councilmember Watanabe, and then Hardy, O'Neill, and Chahal. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to share that I've met with the Healthier Kids Foundation, and specifically Kathleen King and Lauren Clendaniel on several occasions to talk about the program. And I know that they've had some constraints because they were not able to meet or go into the schools. It was more or less the preschools and the programs, through the city, the Halloweens, Christmas in the Park, Easter, and we've collaborated and talked about, you know, other options that they could possibly reach out, you know, to areas where you know, underserved children in the city could be have this opportunity to have their hearing, their eyesight, their dental have checkups, and I think it's a very beneficial program. However, you know, I went back through 2016 when this was brought before the council and how it was all developed, and it didn't seem, I couldn't see where it was a competitive bid process. And so that's why I'm seconding the motion, because I feel, you know, in terms of how the city is operating now, in terms of transparency and procurement, that we need to go out, you know, in the right way. Do a competitive bid process. But what I wanted to ask the city manager is, by doing that, how long would it take for an RFP to be done for a competitive bid process?
I would need to sit down with the department and get back to the city council on looking at their current set of priorities and how we would be able to fit in looks like it may be a complex just because it's health related and health services related. So we'll need to make sure that we have that appropriately staffed.
Okay, because I was just wondering if it would be done before we go through the budget process, approval of the
No,
budget.
it will not be done before we go through the budget.
Okay. But I know Kathleen, you know, the Healthier Kids, you know, I've reached out to them in other ways, and they've been very beneficial to, you know, I knew of a child in need that's in foster care right now, and she needed glasses, and they came through and provided great services for her, as well as gave her a hearing test, and gave me a hearing test too while I had her there at the doctor's office. So just to see how it all rolled out. So I know it provides a very beneficial service, but at the same time, we need to make sure that, you know, we're procuring services correctly. And so I'm seconding the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hardy?
Thank you. I was trying to do the numbers also because I was just a little concerned about what the age of the children, because they do this at the school if this was preschool. Also, when they talk about the number of children screened, for vision, they have, you know, over 2,500, for dental for 1,000, and for adequate hearing. I wasn't clear if those were the same children or a different situation. That wasn't real clear to me, because I was also trying to figure out the cost per child if we were getting a good deal. And I'm left with more questions than I have answers. Do we have someone from here?
Yes, I see
Good.
Ms. King is here. She'll be able to answer some of the
If we can
questions.
maybe if we can have some of those answers.
All right, thank you, Councilmember O'Neill, and then Councilmember Chahal.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that I was proud of that I accomplished when I was on the school board was the establishment of the district wellness program. And so I know that there is a fair amount of emphasis. So you know, I know Healthy Kids does some good work, but so one of the things I'm curious about is, you know, the extent of the outreach that through the wellness programs, and I know the district has been funding some various programs through their nurses and through other programs that they've got through their school sites. So I'm just kind of curious to make sure that there's not overlap. Even I understand reaching, you know, preschool kids, but I mean, there are various services that they are providing. So I would like to know about that. And I think it's a really good service. I mean, it's not really kind of our core area, and I'm certainly somebody who's very interested in having a healthy community. But so I would just like to understand in terms of how this, you know, like I said, what the school district is already doing, and I know that that's an area that they're placing more emphasis on.
Thank you, Councilmember Chahal.
I have another one is like, in addition to the school district, I think the Obamacare covers all these kids, right? So are we taking advantage of, are the kids taking advantage of? What's the difference between those kids being under Obamacare versus these kids being served over here? And other question I have is, it is a request for funding. I don't think it was a city-initiated drive. Basically, it is a request from funding from Healthier Kids Foundation. It was other way around. They must have approached, I don't know the history of it, but did they approach us in the past? Okay, we want this grant to do this thing, or how did it get started, basically?
My recollection, it was a council member who brought it forward as an item for council consideration with development of the application from the applicant.
Oh,
I was going to say it's been council initiated from my understanding.
okay, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Mahan.
Thank you. So I too was trying to make sense, total sense of the numbers to find out if these were individual contacts, all of these numbers, or if like one child received dental screening and vision screening and, hearing screening, and so they were counted 3 times. So how many actual individuals were received, specific tests? But also, if there's another provider of this service, if we go out for a bid, are there other providers? My other question is, how many of these children served didn't have any insurance? Because if they're somewhere at the Art and Wine Festival, is that checked? I mean, anyone can just go up whether they have insurance or not. In other words, do the clients served, do they only serve clients in need, or is there any screening to see if these are clients who have financial needs for these services or not? I don't know how. So yeah, so it's just, I think, a little bit more data, I think, is needed to make a real assessment. But those would be my questions if someone can answer them.
Thank you. I don't see any other council questions. So Ms. King, if you'd like to come forward, please. I think you heard a lot of questions and maybe you have some answers for us. Welcome.
Thank you. And they're all super questions. So I hope I have a little more than 2 minutes.
Sure.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
please.
So I think the question about Obamacare and Affordable Care Act, about 98% of the kids in this county have insurance. And it's kind of a misnomer to say we do screenings. What we really do is we screen with the latest technology. So we call it high tech, high touch, because then what we do is we case manage those children that get a referral. So even if it's in an event, we get enough information to call their parents if they got a referral. And the first thing we do is make sure they have insurance. And if they don't, we help them get insurance. So we didn't put that as part of what you measured us on. In fact, we probably made a really big mistake here. We thought we'd do something new, which they do over in Mountain View, which was a challenge team. And it really took us away from what we're really good at. What we're really good at is preventive care. And so we really like to focus on our healthy lifestyle classes, making sure children have insurance, even at birth, and then making sure they get screened for vision, dental, and hearing. And I can give you, Councilmember Mahan, an idea. It runs around $32 a kid for vision and up to about $45 for dental, because we use licensed contract dentists. And the expensive part is not the screening, it's the case management. Because what you find in a community where so many people came from somewhere else, they have insurance, but they have no idea how to use it. And so our effort is around getting them that first time to a dentist or to an optometrist or to their pediatrician for audiology. And so it is, the kids we're seeing often are for all 3. When we go to the preschools, we do all 3. And we have something really unique just starting in the city of Santa Clara with your preschools. It's where the state's looking at not only giving every child a state ID in school, but giving it to them in preschool. And City of Santa Clara is on the leading edge of that, and they'd like to work with us to track the kids uniquely so that that data that comes out of when they're in preschool, if they needed glasses and got glasses, goes on with them to school. And I know the nurses do vision and hearing screening. They don't do dental because they're not dentists, but they also, I don't think, can do the case management we do. And I'm okay with a cost fee. I'm okay with competitive bidding. There's no one else that we can find does what we do. And so we go competitive bid at the county, we go competitive bid at First Five. We always win because nobody can do all three together. So let's see, what did I miss? We are trying to get to unique kids so that we can follow them year after year and take that data into the school system. And I have to say, we've screened for vision, we've services over 112,000 services of vision, over 64,000 dental, and over 56,000 hearing throughout this county. And sometimes it just takes a little while to move into a school system. We can either do preschool, or we do preschool through 8th grade, or we go high school. It's kind of all over the map. And I think the interest here is where I think it should be, which is little kids. Because if you can help them before they try and read, and you help them with glasses, it's going to make reading a lot easier. One of the biggest issues right now is dental. It's like a tsunami. I think people just don't understand what food can do to little kids' teeth. So I think that's the ones I wrote down. Did I miss any of
I had
them?
one other question. Now, are you a 501c3 organization?
Yeah. And we get funding from the county, First Five, Morgan Family Foundation, Palo Alto Medical Foundation. We just kind of leverage them all together.
Thank you.
Do you get funding from any other cities
Yeah, in fact,
at our level?
I just ran over from Mountain View.
Like the level that we're funding?
Not, let me think. Not at this level, nor have we put as much effort into any of the other cities, except San Jose through the county. But we use county funding here too.
You use county funding for San Jose?
Yeah, and for here. I mean, we leverage all our funding.
Does San Jose put any of their own funding into this?
They used to, I think they will again, because they're going into a program called Quality QRIS, Quality Rated Information Systems. And so part of that is the screenings. So they're looking at going in that direction going forward. And First Five is working with them and us on that.
Okay. I just think that if we're going to go the competitive bid process, that we probably should extend this contract until we're able to at least go through that process, so there's no interruption in service until we do some kind of the bidding or the procurement process. However that bid looks like, I'm not sure what this RFP or this competitive bid process is going to look like, whether we do it per child served or some kind of, gross amount of money. But is there a way, city manager, and what would you recommend, that how long we would maybe extend this contract until we do something like that? Which gives us time to give some direction on, after maybe some questions can be answered, to give some direction on what our options are for a bid on this.
I'd like to suggest that you authorize me authority to extend the contract for, I would say, till the end of the year, so that it allows for us to get a proper procurement in place. I can report back on a schedule once I understand the department priorities and some of the additional workload. I can say we do have some significant procurements that we're going through right now, and so I want the opportunity to talk with finance staff.
Can we, will that give us time to give some input on the procurement at the appropriate time in terms of Whether it's,
Yes.
like I said, a gross or per client served or something like that.
What we can do is we can come back with a return report, a schedule, as well as the input and the inquiries that we've heard here in terms of how we would spec that out. And then if there's a determination that it will need more time than through the end of the year, then we'll ask for that at that time.
Is that all right with you, Ms. King?
Yes, and I think if it's all right with you, I think we can ask the county if we can share their RFP.
That would be great, but I
That
need
might
to
save
ask
some time.
the maker of the motion if she is okay with extending to the end of the year.
Okay, so the motion would be to extend the contract till the end of the year, and then you would come back to us with another alternative.
We'll have a
option
workshop
to
and we'll have a
fund.
discussion and we'll
Okay.
put some meat on the discussion today to receive additional council input. And if at that time, it's unlikely that we'll be able to do the procurement successfully by the end of the calendar year, we'll ask for more time to extend.
Okay, so the motion would be to extend the contract for Healthier Kids until the end of the year, and then you would come back to us at that time. Okay.
Prior to the end of the year.
We'll come back before the end of the year.
Is that okay with the second of the motion? Okay. I have, I think, a few more questions. Councilmember Chahal and then Councilmember O'Neill.
Can I also ask, is that the calendar year or the fiscal
Calendar year.
Okay, good.
So quick question, you mentioned that you do the case management. So in last 3 years, you did almost 5,650 screenings. So what's the percentage of case management out of these?
That's a good question. For vision, it's usually around 14 to 15%. For dental, it's usually about 25 to 26%. And for hearing, it's around 8%. Of course, we're not successful with all children. Some we can't get hold of, but we get between 60 and 65% of those referrals we get into case management. So it works out to be, I think, around 1 out of every 8 or 1 out of every 10 children we screen.
Oh,
That makes sense.
And do we follow up with them if they are not following up the case management issues they need to?
Oh, yeah, we never give up. We call up to 8 times.
Okay.
And then if we still can't get through, we escalate within the school, the preschool system for help. One of your preschoolers about 2 weeks ago had we've screened 112,000 children, 112,000 screenings, had the third worst case of vision I have seen in all that time. So then I escalated it within the preschool system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we especially dental, because it can be infection or pain for kids, we are extremely vigilant.
And does that part covered under the county RFQ you mentioned? And
Yes,
that case
yes.
management part of it?
And the other part they asked for, we just did a big effort to survey families from 2 to 5 years ago to see if, once we finished, did they continue? And the rate of continuation was very high. So it's almost like, if you can just show me how to use my insurance and get me to the right place where they speak my language, they're in my neighborhood, then I'll keep going after you leave me. So we're really happy with the results of that.
Yeah, because that's very important. Like after the screening, that's more important because those are the real people who really need help. And I think we should also, like you are providing some statistics, what screening you're doing, we would also love to have some statistics on the case management, like, okay, this is the percentage of kids who had a case management, and this is actually who utilized the services and benefited from it. That would be
We'd
so
love to.
nice.
We think we're experts at the use of Salesforce data, and we have about 260,000 services in our Salesforce database.
Okay.
So we can divide it any way you want.
Perfect.
And I think it is. A lot of families never had insurance when they were growing up, so they just don't understand how to use it. And once they do, they move forward after that.
Okay, thank you.
But we'd love to share that data.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill?
So one thing, I don't know, not to sound like I'm going off on a tangent, but this whole topic, because to me, it talks about a priority, and this was a project that was initiated by someone that is no longer serving on the council. And, you know, we have never even gotten back to our council goal setting and prioritizing from our, you know, when we had the staff process. So in some ways, I'm like, you know, because this is a couple $100,000 and, you know, and I think there's a lot, that's why I want to make sure that this isn't duplicative, because let's face it, you know, I had meetings today with residents. I'm dealing all the time now through VTA and everything else with people that are homeless, people that need rental assistance, you know, and a lot of things, I just want to raise that concern that I just want to make sure, you know, I am concerned that is this really one of our top priorities to, when we're short on, you know, the funding is short, and, you know, to make sure that this is where we really want to go. Because like I said, it was, you know, not to be critical, but it was a particular interest of somebody who's no longer on the council, and whether we still want to pursue it. Just might want to throw that out.
Well, it'll give us between now and the end of the year to make that determination.
Can I respond to that just because I totally get it about VTA and homeless. I mean, being on the Office of Education, I hear a lot of this too. But there's a really interesting report I've been sending around about how important children are becoming to our population, because so many of us baby boomers are retiring, and the increase in retirement is tripling, but the number of children is staying pretty flat. So I just think some of the work around children has such a leverage. It's such a quick, so.
I totally get that. I'm
Yeah,
a former
and
school board member too, and I'm,
Yeah.
you know, spending a lot of my time on the Schools Foundation in Santa Clara, so I totally get that. I just want to make sure that whatever resources we're having, we're making use, putting them to the best possible use
It's
and
a
the most
really-
effective use. Not to say that your program isn't, you know, valuable, just as, are we going to make the most impact on the lives of our residents?
It's a really good point.
All right, thank you, Councilmember O'Neill, and thank you, Ms. King, for your comments. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the library. Leslie Gardino's challenging the mayor of Los Gatos, saying if the mayor of Santa Clara can read a book to all the kids,
Right.
why
and-
shouldn't the mayor of Los Gatos? And
Right, exactly. And I found out really how bad my vision is. I took the test, and I need glasses. Yeah.
But that was good for the kids to see you in your glasses.
It was fun.
Thank
you. Thank you. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. And a second. To authorize the city manager to extend the current contract until the end of the year and return with further options. Please register your vote. Is everyone registered?
Just a minute.
Oh,
So the action was supposed to be just for the end of the school
yes, end of this calendar year.
year.
It's the calendar year.
Okay, but it's just what it says there, okay.
The end of 2019, we may want to put that in there. It's not fiscal year. All right, and that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have reports of members and special committees. Any member of the council have anything to say? All right, city manager, director reports.
I know that it's been referred to as part of our meeting this evening regarding Senate Bill 50. It does go to the state Senate Government and Finance Committee tomorrow. There is a hearing. We have been monitoring the Senate bill as well as other bills that have been brought to the discussion this evening. Upon tomorrow's hearing, we'll determine what additional action Santa Clara will take. We've been very diligent in providing letters and participating as a region. I also just want to remind the council that Thursday is Take Your Child to School, the work day. And so we're going to be hosting a lot of children here at City Hall as well as throughout city facilities, and just wanted you to be aware of that. And also later that day is Arbor Day and Earth Day at 10 o'clock at the Central Park Pavilion. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, we have our tentative meeting agenda calendar, and which leads us to our adjournment. So please, if you'll bear with me, I have a few items to read here, unfortunately. So I'd like to ask the council to please adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of the following individuals. First is Linda Colgan, mother to Senior Advisory Commissioner Judy Hubbard. Linda was born on December 14th, 1942. She volunteered with PAWS for over 5 years, fostering animals until they found forever homes. Linda lived in Washington State until last June 2018. In July 2018, Linda moved to Santa Clara to live with her daughter, Judy, and son-in-law, Steve. She is survived by her 6 children, 1 daughter-in-law, 4 sons-in-law, 13 grandchildren, and 13 great-grandchildren. I'd also like to ask the council to adjourn in memory of Rita Marie Teixeira. Sorry, Jim, didn't know this. Mother to Director of Parks and Recreation, James Teixeira. Rita was born on February 22nd, 1924, in Bronx, New York. Having been sick as a child, Rita was inspired to choose nursing as her career. She graduated in 1938 from St. Brendan's and in 1945 from St. Vincent's Hospital School of Nursing. She worked as an OB/GYN nurse in both New Jersey and in California. Her greatest satisfaction was caring for premature infants. In the mid-1950s, she met and married Rodrigo Teixeira. They raised 3 boys together. She taught her sons the importance of duty towards family and passion for community service. She volunteered for her local church, Meals on Wheels, Brother Benno's Soup Kitchen, and refugee resettlement services. In her 60s, Rita established a shelter for homeless women. In her 90s, Rita retired to Sacramento, California, where she continued to cook meals for the homeless and walked 6 miles a day. Wow, can't do that now. Those who were fortunate enough to know Rita describe her as the consummate storyteller with the gift of gab and a feisty humor, and that she was as sharp as a tack. Rita passed away on March 25th, 2019. She is survived by her 3 sons, 6 granddaughters, 3 great-grandsons, and the community she served. Sorry to hear that, Jim. She sounds like a phenomenal, phenomenal woman. Also like to adjourn in memory of Patrick Shiles, husband to Electric Department Power Contract Specialist Diana Shiles. Patrick passed away on March 29th, 2019 at the age of 63. Patrick worked security at Moffett Field. He was a loving husband, father, and grandfather. Patrick will forever be missed by his family and friends and everyone who was fortunate enough to know him. I'd also like to ask that the meeting be adjourned in memory of Marie McCauley, mother to Senior Advisory Commissioner Grant McCauley. Marie was born on January 24th, 1922. She and her husband, Bruce, moved to Santa Clara in 1951. Marie was involved as a parent at C.W. Hayman Elementary School, William A. Wilson Junior High School, and Santa Clara High School. She served as a room mother at Hayman Elementary, where she also served several times as PTA president. Wow. And together with her husband, Bruce, were awarded the honorary lifetime membership. Marie was a team mom in Santa Clara Westside Little League. She was selected as Mother of the Year for the city of Santa Clara in 1960. Marie served 2 terms on the school board for Santa Clara Schools. She then worked at Santa Clara High School for 20 years. Marie was active with the Santa Clara Senior Center and participated in many outings, excursions, and trips with the center. She was a past worthy matron and 72-year member of the Order of the Eastern Star, the Santa Clara chapter, a group that has done so much and donated greatly to the youth of Santa Clara. Marie passed away on April 9, 2019. She will be forever missed by her family, friends, and everyone who is fortunate enough to know her. Also like to ask that we offer a moment of silence for the victims of the attacks in Sri Lanka. We offer our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of the individuals who lost their lives from the attacks in Sri Lanka this past Easter Sunday. Our hearts and prayers are with the victims, the injured, and their loved ones. Let us please have a moment of silence in memory of the victims who lost their lives during these terrible attacks. Could I please have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Okay, a motion and a second. Please register your vote. And that passes unanimously, and meeting's adjourned.